A lively crowd gathers around a kiosk, and amid the cheers, a young man asks his assistant for some items. Nervously, the girl hands him the order and thanks him for his help. They celebrate after selling all their stock. Start calculating their earnings after deducting their initial costs. They find out they have earned 1,600,000 yen. Astonished by Shear's selling talent, the little girl compares him to a wizard. She feels shy and says she's exaggerating. Later, the story shifts to present-day Japan, and Shura suddenly finds himself in a forest, staring at a portal to his bedroom. A magical city rises behind him, and his grandmother's room ahead is altered. A young man remembers arriving at the house his grandmother left him. Opening the closet beside the altar, he discovered a gateway to another realm. Shrush closes the door, convinced it's just his mind playing tricks from stress at his former toxic job. Opening it again, he is stunned to find it's real. His grandmother had hidden something mysterious. She remembers vanishing 7 years earlier, before officials declared her dead. As a kid, Shiro often asked her about the secret, and she promised to explain it when he was older. The old woman died before she could share it, but left a letter of guidance beside a picture. In the note, she apologizes for hiding it from him and admits she was a witch from a place called Rufaro. In short, she reveals that the closet connects to Rufaro, a land of magic and special abilities. Alongside fierce creatures and non-human species, the old witch left him a ring that magically let him understand the language of that world and told Shiro to read 2 books hidden behind the altar. Among the books he finds the ring, but the text is unreadable at first. His grandmother's voice rings in his head, prompting him to put on the ring and leaving him thrilled. Now he can grasp the words, and as he reads a voice in his mind, tells him he has acquired the skill of equivalent exchange. Shira jumps and looks for someone nearby, then realizes he's alone. As in a video game, he gains another power and inventory and considers his next move. The young man hesitates to go out, then remembers his grandmother's advice that everything will make sense once he arrives. He leaves the next day after getting ready and says a prayer for his grandmother. The next morning, Shrew sets off eagerly on his long trek. Arriving at the city, he finds warriors, capturals, and mages walking the streets. Enjoying the sights, he realizes the walk has left him starving. A skewer stall catches his eye, and Shrew asks what meat it is. The seller says it's a horned rabbit. Price is just 3 bronze coins. Apologizing, the young man admits he has no money, which annoys the vendor. The thought of the skewer makes his mouth water for the tasty snack. He remembers he has 4,200 yen left in change from the convenience store. He wishes he could pay for the skewers with yen. At that moment, a glowing circle formed in his hand, and Coinder placed the yen he was holding. A young man, amazed, rushes to the stall and asks the vendor if the new coin is bronze, and the vendor confirms it. Finding it odd, the vendor assumes the stranger is a traveler from afar. Pleased with his equivalent exchange skill, Shiro buys 3 skewers. He eats eagerly but feels disappointed because the flavor is plain, the young. The man experiments, changing the coins back to yen and realizing he can switch them anytime with his power. He decides he can get rich and keeps experimenting, converting larger sums and making a silver coin. Back at the stall, he asks whether he can use it to pay. The vendor says there is not enough change. Sheer thinks about what happened to Tally's funds. Eager to explore the area, he walks on until he finds the market, excited to chat with people there, especially in. Shira notices that his modern clothes are drawing stares, and a shy little girl approaches him and nervously offers flowers. He asks the price. She hesitates, becomes more anxious, and withdraws her offer. Picking a yellow flower, he gives her 3 bronze coins, leaving her surprised. He then says he'd like some details included at that price and asks her name. Anna introduces herself. Shira shares both his name and his return. Anna tells Shuru he is in Menorek, a district of the Gillam Kingdom, where bronze coins are worth 100 yen, silver coins 10,000 yen, and gold coins 1 million yen. Typical monthly pay is 8 silver coins, and gold is scarce. Even children like Anna must get government permission to sell. Buying more flowers from her, he leaves her stunned. She promises him that it's fine. It tells him a single flower, used as a decoration, looks out of place. She thought of him warmly and was sure his grandmother would love the blooms. Touch offers to lead him to the government office and eagerly shows him the way. They reach a large building, and she points it out with excitement. Shira becomes nervous and asks whether being a foreigner will cause trouble, but Anna reassures him that the people there are friendly. Sherry hesitates and flinches when a stern-faced old elf questions him in the office. She hands him a form to fill out and lists his options, including working as a street vendor who carries goods for 10 bronze coins a day. The same feed opened a stall, or hire a shop owner for 3 silver coins a day, with a minimum 10-day contract for the shop. Shiro selects the stall option and submits the form. The elf finds his name odd, blurts out that the fee is cheap, and immediately regrets it because he is unsure of local costs. Her stern expression softens as she agrees it is fair. She thanks the mayor for the pricing rules and wishes him luck. Sherry thinks about her, then tells Anna he's shocked it worked out. He thanks her as he plans to head back to the market. Anna looks sad as she says goodbye, timidly lowering her head. But when Sheer starts off the wrong way, she calls out to correct him and points him in the right direction. At the market, she asks him what he will sell. Starting confidently, he admits he is clueless. Noticing his hesitation, Anna grins and suggests some adventure gear. Acting on her idea, Shiru sees a sorceress, a warrior, and soldiers. Anna explains the monsters from the nearby forest and asks you to draw them here. He pictures a tentacle beast attacking him, then remembers her advice. Sadly, she said the monsters hurt her flower sales. But he cheers up, glad he bought so many and is beaming, and Anna says she's happy they met. She embarrasses Shiro and offers to show him the market. They inspect a lantern shop whose owner looks similar. A sleeping bag stall staffed by a cat-clopped vendor. A knife and rope shop where a woman in a bunny costume ties a man. Yes, the variety of marbles proves it, and Anna proudly confirms it's quite a place. True to her promise, Anna tapped her chest, but the tap was harder than she meant, so she coughed in surprise and the young man grew worried. Taking Sher's hand, she pointed out the nearby shops and he looked at her warmly, picturing her as a wonderful wife someday. While online, they chatted endlessly. Shira began daydreaming about soon having a lovely wife and daughter. Anna's eager question about what he planned to sell broke his train of thought. Shir leaned close and softly whispered the answer into her ear. The next day, when Anna heard Shir's reply, she looked puzzled and did not understand what he meant. Morning came, Shura stretched with excitement as he got ready to set up his goods. Someone popped up cheerfully to say hello. When asked if she'd be selling flowers again, she nodded and said she had gotten up early to gather them. Shira praised her, saying the flowers were gorgeous and would sell well. Anna smiled and said she was selling them to buy her mother's medicine. Full of energy, Anna said goodbye, and she replied that he would catch up with her later. Rushing off with her basket, she handed out flowers to people until she collided with someone and fell. Seeing this, he was moved to tears and shouted encouragement to her, vowing to do his best too. At that moment, his first customer came over and asked what he was selling. The customer looked puzzled when she handed over the box and wondered if it was a handmade item. They explained it was a matchbox containing a small stick that makes fire. The customer, an adventurer, was skeptical and said he had never heard of a tiny piece of wood that could create flames. Shuru rubbed the match across the box, sparking a small flame as the adventurer watched closely, at first confused. He cried out in amazement, stunned by what he saw and causing a fuss around them. The adventurer dropped to the ground and asked in awe how she did it. Shira held the glowing match, shrugged, and unfazed by the adventurer, asked whether he had really never seen anything like it. He warned he'd show it one more time and began counting down. At the end, he lit another match, astonishing the adventurer again. A crowd gathered, pulled in by the adventurer's reaction, everyone stunned. Many believed it was sorcery, magic, or a mystical device, but no one had seen anything like it. Shiro pitched his product and assured them it was easy to use, so customers began trying the matches themselves and marveled at them. Shiro grinned, pleased that his plan was working out. On a market trip with Anna, he noticed this world didn't know about matches, so he went back to his own world to get some to sell. An old elf from Markwood had not seen anything like that in 250 years, and a lizard man agreed eagerly. The earlier adventurer admitted that it was incredible. Lighting a fire with a rock was slow, and magic tools were hard to use. The adventurer noted that those tools were hard to carry. Without a witch's help, starting a fire took ages. With a smug nod, Shiru launched into a speech like a tech genius, unveiling a breakthrough gadget, and declared people would no longer face those hassles because he had brought freedom. Dramatically dressed like Steve Jobs, he held up the tiny box as the crowd cheered wildly. When he asked who wanted to buy, someone immediately offered but was cut off. The adventurer suddenly became serious and asked how much the match costs. The crowd murmured, thinking they'd be expensive. But he was sure ready for this. He asked the adventurer what he thought the price might be. After a pause, the adventurer guessed 80 bronze coins. Smiling, Shira began weighing his choices, deciding whether to sell them as a fancy item for a high profit per sale or to price them low to earn more from many buyers. The first plan would give him a cut and pay him on every sale. At first, only a few people could afford it, but later many more could buy it, and his earnings might fall. Each box contains 40 matches, and he offers a discount to celebrate his new business, selling each box for 5 bronze coins. It surprised everyone and prompted immediate orders. Shuru warns them to keep the matcha dry because water will ruin it. By the end, more than 100 customers have bought everything, leaving one old man without a purchase because the stock runs out, and the seller apologizes and promises him a spot in line tomorrow. The old man snapped, insultingly saying he's only 120 years old. Worn out, Chiru lies down, stunned by the crowd and dreading even more tomorrow. Clouds gather as the young man doubts he can keep up, sees a flower fall to the ground, and feels he should not give up. Focus shifts to Anna, who cheerfully picks up the fallen flower as she always does. Full of her usual energy, she keeps selling her flowers, calling out that they're affordable. Suddenly someone shouts her name, and she turns to see. Shuru was shocked and asked about his shop. He explained it was already sold out and closed for the day. It congratulates him, but when Shrew asks about her sales, blushing, she tucks her flower basket away and admits she is unsure. Tears well up as she tries to figure out why her flowers won't move. Concerned, she would check if she was all right, and the other would brush off her tears, insisting she was fine. She hurries off to sell more. He grabs her arm to stop her. Confused, she looks at him with tear-filled eyes as he pleads with her to hear him out. She yells and asks what he means. He asks her for help tomorrow, and she wonders if everything is okay too. Reassuring her, she says he needs her because she is truly capable and promises to pay her. Beaming, Anna nods at the offer and agrees to help, excited to team up with Shuru. He thanks her, but she replies that it's unnecessary because she hasn't sold a single flower. Holding his hand, she insists she's the one who's grateful to him. He watches her warmly and takes her sincere thanks as a sign he must work hard. Shir asks if they can meet tomorrow, and she eagerly agrees while still holding his hand. After they part, he looks around to make sure no one is watching. Once the coast is clear, he opens a portal to his world and hides it because he fears being discovered. He notes the portal connected to a closet can open anywhere. The gossip still worries him. Arriving home, he immediately checks his earnings. With a special conversion, he exchanges his coins for yen. With the day's sales at 25,550 yen, he is stunned as he compares it to his old job's pay. If this keeps up, he won't need to work again, and imagines playing video games and reading manga. Snaps back to reality and starts preparing for tomorrow. Shiro is in a supermarket, searching for matchboxes. He finds them and notices survival options that resist wind and water, and is surprised he didn't know about them. He takes several to sell to adventurers for profit. The cashier thinks it's odd and worries he might be unhinged. Shior, loaded with boxes, realizes he underestimated how hard it would be to haul him home. He gets the idea to use his conversion ability. With another special skill available, the young man brings his shopping to a quiet spot and activates his spatial storage. At that moment, a rip in reality opens and startles Shiro. He starts tossing the packages into it, and when he's finished, he cheers because he now has his own pocket dimension. He remembers stuffing everything into a backpack because his old job hurt his back. He knows he couldn't have carried all these purchases if he'd had to use a bag. Shiro is stunned to find he can see details about the item inside the large magic circle, and he begins to question whether his powers have limits and what his grandmother might be doing. Looking at his hands, he realizes he will never need to carry anything again. He will sell matchboxes for 4 more days and then decide what else to sell. Boldly raising his arm, he says that with these skills he will become wealthy. A little girl points at him and tells her mother the strange man is talking to himself again. The mother scolds her for pointing at strangers. Feeling shy, she needs to lie down and heads home. Anna starts the day in a modest, plain brick house. Little Anna says we bought her mother, and a vase of flowers sits on the windowsill while her mother lies in bed. The woman smiles and asks if Anna will take the flowers, and the girl says no because she is going to help at Shiru's shop. At his grandmother's house in the real world, Shira stood before her altar asking for her blessing while he stepped through the portal, thrilled to begin the day. Anna walks through the city smiling, and when she catches up, he greets her and apologizes for being late, She says she just arrived. Still, he presses her to admit she waited a little. She admits customers were already lining up, and that's when he notices several people around the shop. Anna turns to him, eager to begin, but he says he still needs to get a few things ready. He notices so many people waiting to buy that they are blocking other stores. He knows from his old job that it's not good. A fellow shop owner tells him about the crowd, and Shiru promises to take care of it. A closer look shows the man is the vendor at the skewer stall. The vendor approaches Shiru and says he heard about the matchsticks but didn't believe it was him. Noticing the line but no one being served, he asks if something is wrong. Okay, explain the issue with the other shops so the merchant understands. His companions suggest Shira use their stall for free today because it is farther away. Shiru asks if that's okay, and the woman says it's fine because they're taking a break, so Shiru thanks her and Anna's eyes light up. He asks if that person is the merchant's wife. The man quickly says she is his sister. She winks at Shiru, who is stunned because they do not look alike. A stunning girl watches as Shiru and Anna walk through a small market to the roasted meat shop, and as soon as they arrive, the pair hurry to set up their products. Shiro explains the sizes and items to sell. She says she has it but looks nervous, so he asks if she's okay because she seems shaky. Still, they open the shop. A long line waits outside while they apologize for the delay and announce they will start serving. Drew requests that priority ticket holders step forward. He shows Anna how to take orders, and she gets flustered but follows his lead. Shocked by how fast the boxes are selling, Anna watches in awe and calls the next customer while many people still wait in line. Someone marvels at how amazing this is, wondering if this is the magic of selling. They have to close soon, and Shiro apologizes to customers because the items are out of stock. Anna can hardly believe it. Shir credits Anna's help and the skewer stall owners. He starts by counting the coins they made and his floors. He said he expected 200,000 yen from yesterday's sales, but they earned 1 million in 3 hours. A young man figures the 5 million yen he is carrying is about 490,000 yen per hour and wonders whether that counts as a millionaire's income. To avoid trouble, he decides to leave and slings on his backpack, but its weight makes him stagger. He thinks about stashing it in his pocket dimension, but hesitates because he doesn't want anyone to notice. He hands Anna a bag of coins to pay her, and the little girl thanks him, clearly excited. She pats her head, suggests she buy her mama a gift, and he tells her she was a big help. Anna insists she's the one who should be grateful for the job at his shop. Shira cuts her off. She said she didn't need to thank him because she had earned it through hard work and gave her a playful wink. A pout trying to show more gratitude makes Shira chuckle. A sudden stomach rumble leaves her red-faced. Shira opens a bag, points out they missed the break, and invites her to share a meal with him. Shiru pulls sandwiches from Anna's bag. Anna, mouth-watering, asks if they are bread. Tasting it, Shira is amazed, her eyes sparkling as she eats happily and says how tasty it is, feeling glad she enjoys it. A tall, well-dressed young woman with long hair approaches as they eat. She asks for a moment of his time, mentions hearing rumors about matches, and asks whether Shura was the seller. He confirms being there, but says everything's sold out. Holding a hand to her chest, the woman says she didn't come to buy. Sankara arrived to meet him and introduced herself as the city's mayor. Shiru is surprised that someone so young and attractive holds that role, instead picturing a tough, muscular figure. He stumbles over his words and asks what she wants to talk about while Sankara and Anna watch closely. Thanks to Shuru for bringing his merchant skills deep into the city of Bayaz. Shari says he should be the one thanking her for letting him sell there. She calls him humble and says most local merchants are difficult, leaving Shiro puzzled. A sudden suggestion that he could help her catches him off guard, and they start talking. In Anna dozes off, dreaming of food, Sankara says the city's isolation makes merchants act as if they're doing everyone a favor simply by showing up. By charging high prices for their goods while local products sell cheaply, they disrupt the city's economy. Wide-eyed, Shuru listens as she passionately explains her goal to fix this by creating a market. His stunned gaze makes her feel shy after her speech. She gives him a key, leaving him wondering what it opens. Baffled, Sharu wonders if it's the key to Sankara's house. Dismissing the thought felt unlikely. She wasn't suggesting anything romantic. Sankara winks and says it's her house key, leaving him completely shocked. He brushes it off when she asks what's wrong. Anam speaks up, saying the mayor wants to live with Shiro. He's confused and Anna doubles down, saying Sinkar wants to marry him, which makes Sinkar clench her teeth in embarrassment. She firmly denies it, insisting she is neither single nor desperate, and regains her composure. Getting back to business, she asks for a favor. An interruption cuts in to ask if she's married, and she blushes and says no. Point to an empty house and explain he can use the key to enter it starting tomorrow. She wants him to sell his goods from its first floor. Surprised, Shrew asks why, and as he suspected, Sankara says other merchants complain they could not. He couldn't compete with the long lines at his shop, so he nods, understanding their struggle. Sankara smiles confidently and offers to show him around, saying he does not have to decide right away. Walking through the city, they reach the house she offered and fall silent, moved by the moment. While Anna joyfully dashes around celebrating the shop's opening, a woman says she is not sure everything is fine and adds that she hopes they enjoy it. And says she has one more question. Anna leans in and murmurs in his ear that the mayor may be wondering if he knows someone with a red face. Sheer loudly says he understands and that he has no girlfriend, leaving the mayor flustered, and the mayor stammers that it wasn't her intended question. The young man chuckles and says he was only teasing. Mayor Sankara, still red-faced, soon regains her composure. And looking serious, asks why he chose to sell his goods in this town. It's a small place with only 500 residents, she points out. He says a little sadly that he could earn more elsewhere. She agrees he has a point, and he says he enjoys it here even though he arrived only 3 days ago. Grateful for Anna's hard work helping him with the shop, he praises the mayor's kindness even as a newcomer, and the mayor, moved by his words, glows with admiration while the young man speaks of his love for the city. He remembers the friendly people he met in Menore. Despite coming from another world and not knowing other towns, I felt none could be as welcoming as this one. Sankara presses her hands to her chest and thanks Shiri, moved by his kind words. Anna, surprised, held her as he realized he'd made a girl cry, and he quickly apologized, saying he didn't mean to. The mayor offers her hand and invites him to call her Sankara. As he shakes it, he asks her to call him Shuru. Anna introduces herself too. They all shake hands. The mayor says she is pleased to meet them. A chart shows Shuru's rapid rise from a maxed exceller to a shop owner in just 3 days. In his mind, he sees his grandmother in heaven smiling and giving a peace sign. The next day, he signs a 1-month lease on the shop. 5 days later, Shiro tells the customers the stock is gone, surprising them. Dressed in a suit and tie, the young man reads his notes, puzzled because he thought he had sold enough to supply the whole city. Someone pops in to say she's finished cleaning the shop. She suggests resting upstairs again and offers to help him more, but he says she has already done enough. Disappointed, the little girl watches as she stretches out in his chair and lays out snacks on a tray. Turning to hand them to Anna, he finds her asleep. While the little girl sleeps, she mumbles, mistaking Shuru for her father. Trying to correct her, he instead lifts Anna into his arms when she asks for a hug. She beams as her father finally holds her, and her mother does the same. They then drifted back to sleep, which may be surprising. Sheru wonders if he's become a father figure and tucks a blanket around her, telling her she can ask him for anything. Anna sleeps on, smiling, as Shiri vows to do his best for her. On the 6th day of sales, Shiru lets Anna take a break. Worn out, he has forgotten how hard it is to work alone. Just then, the mayor enters. He tells her he's out of stock again, and she says it's no surprise for a seller like him, but then she explains the real issue. His sales far exceeded the city's needs. The mayor says she has heard rumors that people are reselling his goods in other towns. Shiro is considering limiting how many items each customer can buy. Sankara looks serious and says she came to ask a favor. Sensing the importance, he leads her upstairs and asks about her request. First, she wonders whether to renew her membership in the city's Adventurers Guild. Confirming the name Silver Moon surprises the mayor, who did not expect him to know so much already. Shrew says that's because he's been watching the city, and many of his customers are adventurers, so the guild runs like an outsourcing company. We accept client requests and assign them to freelance adventurers, and the organization pays for missions once they are completed. These activities often involve killing dangerous monsters, collecting herbs and mushrooms for medicine, and carrying out other tasks. Sankara says Santru already knows it's easier to say that Silver Moon is the city's only guild. Beginning to talk about the guild master, she and her pups are visibly upset. The guild master leads the organization and holds strong authority. SHR suddenly stands up and asks if something has happened to the guild master. After a pause, the mayor reveals that the flood left people stunned. Sankara says the guild now lacks funds to pay for adventures. It is worrying that they might lead the city. Shore agrees and is horrified that this would be a major issue. The mayor says she has a plan, as she always does in tough situations. The mayor says the capital's Adventurers Guild wants to open a branch in the city. She has always refused to protect Silver Moon. Given the circumstances, Shira suggests accepting the capital's offer may be the best choice. Sankara thanks him happily for his input. When Shiri glances at her, he notices her figure, looks away embarrassed, and says it's no big deal. The mayor says if she approves the request, the capital's guild will visit to decide whether to open a brand. She asks Shrew to show the matchboxes to them. He says he's fine with it and asks what the issue is. Sankar says she's never seen anything like them, not even in the capital, and wonders how he came by such an item. Shira hesitates in his response. Apologizing for prying, she says that if Shira has a monopoly on the product, the guild will become more interested. Shira says he must get the Capital Guild's attention to succeed. Unease grips the mayor, but she reassures the other woman and promises to bring something that will even impress her. Kind and shy, Sankarakalsim promises to repay the favor. The next day Anna is back at work and sees that Shira is worried, so she asks if he's okay. He looks for something to catch the guild inspector's interest. He stands up, determined, and tells Anna he must go to St. Car's house. He arrives to find Sanka stunned by Shiru's request, and she asks if he is serious. Shira confirms that he wants to become an adventurer and asks permission to join them, and asks if he is serious about joining adventurers on missions. He agrees, saying it's the only way to find out their needs. The mayor, keeping a serious tone, asks if they are sure they understand the risks. Adventurers in that region go only to the forest, and we catch a glimpse of the eastern forest with a large, shadowy, wolf-like creature. Shira acknowledges the danger, but suggests he might be an adventurer who collects her. Sankara agrees that this option is safer. She plans to introduce him to a few adventurers. The notes are straining the relationship with the Silver Moon Guild. Sankara says the guild's substitute master came to her house last night, slipping through the shadows. Desperate, he begged for money, crying and throwing himself onto the floor. Stunned by the bold request, Shira asks how much the guild needs, and Sankar holds up 10 fingers. Shira guesses 10 coppers but shakes her head. He then asks if it's 10 silvers. She denies it again. Shiru shouts in disbelief when he sees his 10 gold coins. That is worth 10 million yen. Sankara scolds him for shouting. Lowering her head, she says such an amount doesn't exist in their small town. Just a tenth of that amount might have been manageable. Asking the guild for help would be difficult after refusing their plea. The mayor looks troubled. Shira stares at the inkstand on her desk, chooses to write a letter, and passes it to Shira with a warning not to hope for too much. Traveling to the Silver Moon Guild with others, he feels anxious when he arrives because it is his first visit. Stepping inside, he finds a huge mess and is immediately struck by an adventurer, crashing to the floor. The warrior says Shira was fresh meat there and must respect his elders. Shira struggles to his feet and says he is a merchant, not an adventurer. The adventurer still threatens him, insisting that because Shrew is a rich merchant, he should respect his punch. Shira slips away, thinking this shouldn't happen, and heads for the door. After going inside, he asks permission to enter, then looks around and finds no one. Sensing someone nearby, he asks who it is, hears soft crying, walks over to say he has a letter from the mayor, and the person replies. Shiru gently touches her shoulder, asks permission and says he needs to talk, so the young girl with rabbit ears and a long ponytail spins around to face him. Shocked because she doesn't know Shiru or Yelves, she asks who he is and how long he has been standing there. Shiru is unsure if she belongs in the guild. She keeps shouting, insisting he explain why he touched her. Still yelling, she asks whether Shira has a crush on her or something. She warns him that with one command she, a girl from Silvermoon, could summon 1,000 strong men. Then she imagines leading a revolutionary army. Shiro snaps her back to the present and asks if anyone else is nearby. She admits there may be others sometimes, but insists only she could beat him. Flailing her arms, she claims her punch could shatter stones. Shira gives her a disappointed look, thinking she'll be hard to handle. Cutting her off again, he asks where the substitute master is and asks her to summon him, and she admits she could call the substitute master. Then she reveals she is the guild's substitute master. Amal, the rabbit-eared girl, recalls how she became the new guild master, leaving everyone stunned. It happened because she was the only one left. Another girl had been there, but she disappeared after the old master ran off. Drunk, Emil slams a bottle down and tells Shuru that the two were secretly together, ranting that they didn't realize she'd figured it out, explaining that it began with them sneaking kisses in hidden spots. Finally, they openly showed their romance in the master's room. She began to swear. They want them to lose everything, be attacked, and end up as slaves. Mel says the former master stank like a mutt, and Shira tries to comfort her by saying she did all she could. He asks whether she's finished venting, and she calls him sweet for listening to her grumble for 5 hours. Then, blushing, she starts to unbutton her shirt to repay his kindness, but then doubts what she's doing. Emil quickly rebuttons her shirt and asks if he has a task to complete. Shur hands her the mayor's letter. When Emo finds out who sent it, she lashes out with a stream of insults. Shari wonders whether his grandmother's ring broke because he could not follow what she said. He implies she fabricates stories and clarifies the letters written by Miss Sankara, the mayor of Minor. Still, Emil keeps attacking the mayor, calling her stupid and heartless. Snatching the letter from Shira, she says that if it's from Sankara it should be destroyed and tears it into pieces. Calling things like cheating and betrayal awful, Emil draws shouts of surprise. She turns to him and demands he explain his connection to Sankara. She's angry because the mayor rejected Silver Moon and brought in a different guild. That was why she had shamelessly used the mayor. Just then, Sankara sneezes back in her office. Mel complains that even after kneeling before the mayor, Sankara refused to give her 10 gold coins. Upset, Sankara calls Shiro mine. Shiro tries to calm things by explaining that it was a large sum of money. Sankara likely had other worries. The girl turns to Shuru and asks why he keeps defending the mayor, then suggests he might have feelings for Sankara. Through tears, she admits she still loves the mayor and thinks of her as her best friend. Shira believes insulting someone, especially a close friend, is wrong. Ima wipes away her tears and says the eldest man suffered without the money, and she does not know what to do next. Since she opened up about her feelings for the mayor, the young man says he'll let her off for tearing up the letter. Cher gives Emo a handkerchief and mentions she has a favorite to ask the guild. She stands up, straightens her hat, and asks him what he needs. He says he wants to join a mission-based adventure. Emel says she'll submit the request, even though they haven't done this before. The young man is worried about arranging it, and she reassures him she will figure it out. She says only one group fits, made up of 4 skilled numbers, so it will be expensive. She tells him the group's name is Asia Flash. Picture them around a campfire in the woods, a long-haired sorceress and a tall, middle-aged cleric, a young warrior and a captive. Shira drifts into thought, remembering his time here since arriving and how he found the portal in the wardrobe. The day he met Anna and everything that followed. Everything moved quickly after he started working at the shop the mayor gave him. The Silver Moon Guild's mystery returns to his mind. Shir recalls his unexpected meeting with the substitute master in Nilla with a mix of curiosity and embarrassment. Anna pulls him back to the present, cutting off his thoughts. She looks worried and asks whether he's really planning to close the shop for a while. Shiru nods and says it's only for 3 days, and she plans to live like an adventurer during that time. Anna listens closely and grins, showing she understands, and saying it makes her glad because she has her own personal issues to sort out. As she begins to walk away, a small backpack appears on her back. Shrew, worried, asks if something is wrong, and Anna offers a soft smile, reassures him it's nothing, and tells him to stay safe before she leaves. Once they part, Shur walks to the guild and stops at the big wooden door. A familiar face surprises him as he reaches to push it open. Emil appears, says she has been waiting, and quickly tells him to step inside. Shira hesitates, memories of the night before flooding his mind, his face flushing as he looks away, clearly flustered. Noticing this, Emil blinks and asks why he seems afraid, but before he can answer, she promises she will not tease him. With a wave, she shifts the subject and introduces a team of silver-rank adventurers, the guild's pride. Watching the group, Shire notices a young adventurer on a nearby bench who looks curious. Himalgo announces that this team will join Shiri on his mission to gather special herbs. 2 girls in the group lock eyes with Shiru, and they do it before Emo can name the leader. Standing up with a wide, excited smile, the young man greets Shiru and says it's been a while since they last met. Shur blinks a few times, puzzled, trying to place the boy's face, then it clicks. This was the first adventure where he bought matches. The boy properly introduces himself as the group's leader, Liar. He points to an older man in clerical robes named Raul. Raul steps forward smiling warmly, greets Shiro, and says he hopes they'll get along well. Liar points out a key detail. Though Roll is a cleric, he is also a strong fighter who uses a mace as his main weapon. Despite his gentle nature, Liar warns that Roll should not be angered. Next, he introduces a young girl with long hair in a cloak and a large witch's hat holding a staff. Nesca is the group's sorceress. Liar nudges her, and with a blank expression, she quietly says it's nice to meet Shuru. Liar grins and says she's shy but skilled at magic, though her spells take a little longer to cast. Nesca lifts her staff, lightly taps the Liar on the head, and mutters that he should stay out of her business. Liar grumbles that he won't until she speeds up her casting, and Nesca rolls her eyes and says she'll consider it. Before Liar can continue the introductions, something unexpected happens. A figure flips through the air at the back of the room, lands nimbly between Liar and Shore, and introduces herself energetically as Keela. He studies her with interest, his gaze pausing on the sudden twitch of her feline ears. Unable to hold back, he asks if she is from the cat race. Liar grows serious and says many people, including some guild clients, dislike this race. Keela glances at Liar and says she finds that odd, while Shura feels upset at anyone who could dislike such an adorable race, and hearing this Keela smiles and poses, saying his words made her blush. Liar says proudly that Keela is the group's scout, guiding them, spotting traps, and handling reconnaissance. Thrilled, Keela adds she fights with a bow and a dagger. Shiro tells her that's impressive, making her beam with pride, then he confidently says he hasn't seen much yet. He then glares at her and notes she is also the fastest at escaping. The cat waits in her arms, insisting he didn't have to bring that up. The guild leader claps loudly, asks if they're ready to leave, and glances at Shiro to see if he's prepared. Shiro says he's ready, eager, and Liar enjoys the young man's lively voice as she says they're heading to the eastern forest. He approaches a bar, pauses briefly, then pushes the door open. A man who has been drinking rises to his feet, stumbles toward her as if he recognizes her from before, and reaches for the little girl's face, claiming it says he promised. Just as the door swings shut, Sheer takes in the steady gazes of his new teammates, the monk warrior Rolf, the sorceress Nesca, the scout Keela, and the bold leader Liar. Liar thinks about the adventure ahead and hopes it goes smoothly. Keela leads the group in single file along a narrow forest trail, moving carefully and staying alert. Young Shiro is nervous, but Liar notices and comforts him, promising they'll avoid monsters when they can, and Shiro sighs with relief and thanks him. Liar complains that searching for herbs is dull. Keela says she already gathered some. The raw F cautions indicate the specific herbs they need are scarce and hard to find. The monk explains that finding those herbs will complete their tasks. Liar, worried as dusk approaches over Nesca Warren, decides to set up camp right there. Shiro blinks in surprise, unsure if it's too soon to stop, and the warrior grins, explaining that resting whenever possible is a key rule for adventurers. Moved by the wisdom, Shiro tears up, realizing his former boss never shared such advice. Liar then orders everyone to prepare the camp. Shiro and Keela gather sticks. Rolf swings his axe to cut down small trees, while Liar starts a fire with matches he bought and tells Shiro they're incredibly handy. The cleric excels at thanking your sponsor for the supplies. Liar jokes that he could get rich selling matches in the capital. Rolf nods but warns that the Merchant Association could cause trouble if they find out. Liar chuckles, says the cleric's foresight is usually accurate, guiding Shiro and improving the precision of all predictions. Nesca trudges over, complaining about hunger, and Liar graze and calls everyone to eat after their long march. Shiryu watches Nesca take a bite of bread. His eyes linger on the meal of tough bread and dried meat. I can't see how even seasoned adventurers manage on such plain food. Keela looks at him to see if he's eaten, then tears off a chunk of meat with her teeth and holds it out. Sheer politely refuses, thanks her, and says he brought his own supplies as he packs up his bag. Liar watches closely as Ralph's jaw drops when she reveals what's inside, and the leader can hardly believe it's real food. The group stares in amazement at the stash. Shiro pulls out canned goods, instant noodles, and an assortment of cookies. Nesca gulps nervously as Liar asks whether Sheer will eat it all alone. Sheer says he brought enough for everyone. The team is stunned as Shire says he's testing new items for his store and wants their feedback. Liar decides these are free samples after a brief hesitation, and the group cheers as they dive in. Liar grabs ramen while Gila takes a rice cake. Rolf takes a bread roll and Nesca grabs a cookie. Everyone is delighted by the flavors, and Sheer watches them savor the treats, noting their enjoyment. Flopping down with her belly full, Nesca hugs the candy and vows to remember chocolate forever. Ralph clutches a crucifix, tears streaming down his face, and calls it a holy blessing. They fall asleep peacefully, with Nesca mumbling about chocolate in her dreams. Liar walks up to Shiro and tells him to rest too. Shiro admits he's not used to going to bed early, so Liar offers to chat. The young man watches him and sips tea. Gazing at his reflection in a teacup, Shiro notices the adventurer skipped sleeping bags and later explains he did so to stay agile if danger strikes. Liar tucks a blanket around the sorceress, noting one would not be enough in winter, but too many would weigh them down. Sighing, he wishes he had a storage skill, and she stirs butter into his tea when it's mentioned. Curious, he asks about the spatial storage ability. Liar shares has a rare gift held by only 1 in 100,000. Liar says an old dungeon contains a book with that skill, and Shira hides his shock because he already has it. Casually, he asks the warrior what such a find might fetch in Liar, the warrior puzzled by the question. It is used as if it could hold a carriage's worth. It stands by a mansion. Shiro pales and nods in agreement. Liar admits is beyond anything he could ever earn. Silently, the merchant rejoices and plans to test the limits of his skill later. Just as Shiro says he's going to sleep, Liar senses danger and grabs his sword, startling him, and Shiro, confused, asks what is happening, but Liar hushes him with a gesture. Rousing Keela and Ralph, he tells Shiro to wake the sorceress because the leader senses something approaching, getting them ready for a monster attack. Liar catches the sorceress mumbling about chocolate in her sleep. Shiro shakes her, urging her to drop the candy dreams because it's urgent. Nesca stirs, blinking awake with her usual blank expression. Killa sniffs the air while Liar notices and asks if Killa picks up anything. The scout grimaces, warning of trouble because the wind hides the monster's scent. Ralph figures it's a clever creature. Liar urges Nesca to prepare a spell despite her drowsiness. A loud crash cuts through before she can act. Startled, the warrior spins around and shifts into a fighting stance, eyes widening as a massive killer bear lumbers toward them. Lyra grimly says their silver rank team can't beat it. Shivers shivers at its towering size, and the leader suggests they flee. Ralph interrupts and says escape is futile. Only Killa might slip away with her cat-like agility. Killa, fully armed fighter, who refuses to abandon her comrades. The cleric insists a fight would be hopeless, and the scout squeaks in fear, but Liar stays calm. The bear roars, ready to charge, and deciding its next move. Ralph grayly says someone must act as bait. Lyra notices his tension spikes and treats them like a test of himself. The newbie or the non-adventurer as choices. Signing is confident he will be chosen. When Liar grabs his shoulder, he braces for an apology about being sacrificed. Instead, Liar told Skoxum to escape with Nesca and Kilo, while he and Rolf distracted the beast. Stunned, Lyra apologized to Rolf, but the cleric just grinned and said not to worry after their long journey. Reacting to their choice, she responds as he starts to speak. Nesca steps forward, pledging to fight as well. The warrior stops her, warning her slowness will hold them back. He then teases that he wants to impress her in his last moments. Liar smiles at the sorceress and asks her to step back. She mutters that he's a fool as she looks down. He braces himself, asks Ralph for a healing spell if he survives the first hit, and the cleric nods, wishing him luck. Determined, Liar says he'll set a trap, and when it springs, everyone must run immediately. Keela's eyes widen as she warns that something is sneaking up behind. Liar is reluctant to trust her. Peering into the shadowy forest, he realizes she's right. Two fierce killer bears circle them, and the beast's roars fill the air. Nesca steps back as the leader shouts for her and Keela to prepare to escape. Raoul backs him up, saying he and one other will hold the line. Trembling, Anna refuses, saying there is no way out and they will die. Monsters surge forward, pinning the group in a tight spot. Shear's heart races, but he remembers his grandmother's voice telling him never to lose hope in dark times, so he hurriedly digs through his backpack while Liar, surprised, asks what he's up to. The warrior orders him to flee, but Shear stands his ground, facing the killer bear with courage, then tosses something at the creature and the beast freezes instantly, its body stiffening mid-motion as if an unseen force stopped it just before explosives detonate. Fireworks erupt, leaving the beast stunned and the group staring in total amazement. Seizing his chance, Sherry charges the monster, shouting that the bear will regret ever crossing his path. Without pause, he pulls out a spray and blasts it into the animal's face. The numbear falters before lunging. Stunned by the spraykin's power, Liar steps closer and asks whether it is some kind of magic. Shiro grins, says it's just a special tool, shows the can, and explains it releases a strong poison when opened. The merchant urges them to seize the moment and escape, but Liar interrupts. They asked if the poison had hit the monster's eyes and nose, and if it had, they could not let this perfect shot slip away. The group quickly grasps the situation and prepares to act, after a fierce fight. After defeating the monsters, they cheer their success deep in the forest. Liar cautions that they now need to cut up the bear meat and lazily deal with any remaining threats. Shira takes the chance to tease Liar, asking whether he's smitten with Nesca. The warrior and sorcerers flush with embarrassment and demand to know what Shiro means. He reminds them that Liar said he wanted to impress a frightened girl. The group leader dismisses it and tries to move on. They quietly gather the meat and other valuable bear parts for the market. Ralph takes charge of the monster dissection and assigns the team to remove the skin, meat, and claws. Keela, intrigued, asks what they plan to do with the bear's lower parts. The cleric says the testicles can be made into medicine and asks her to cut them. Guide Shira horrify at the sight. Liar walks up to Shiro with a stern look and asks permission to bring up something serious. Liar urges Shiro to abandon the herb-gathering task and head back to the city. Pointing to the dead bear, he said the merchant would rather sell the materials before they spoil, because they are worth more than rare herbs. Shiri is stunned when Liar claims half the spoils, arguing that without Shiro's item, they would all be gone. With the spray can in hand, he figures it must cost a fortune. Shiro Kansom says the true value is that they're all still breathing. Shiro's words warm the liar's heart, and he smiles while praising Shiro's kindness. Keela stops short, then suddenly lunges at Shiro, shouting that he is amazing. Shiro ducks the hug. Keela tumbles headfirst into a bush as Nesca and the merchant look on. The sorcerer adds that she also thinks Shiro is a solid guy. Ralph says the world could use more merchants like him. Red-faced Shrew feels the praise piling up. Shrew shifts the topic, looks at the liar, and says he knows they need to head back to the city. He offered to take the killer bear's materials with him. Liar chuckles and doubts Shira's strength, but is cut off before he can say more. Shira uses his spatial storage skill, and tears open a portal in reality. The group is stunned, and Shiro, seeing their faces, apologizes for not telling them sooner. Liar shrugs off the surprise and says it's fine because they owe him their lives. As it prepares to go, Liar stops him. Pointing out that his storage ability made it possible, he said they should continue the mission. With no chance to argue, Shira is dragged along for 2 more days at adventure before they finally return to the city. And agrees, then smiles, clearly thrilled to see Shira again. Liar curious asks if the girl is Shura's daughter, but Shura says she is only his shop assistant. The warrior introduces himself politely. Shira hands Anna the key to the shop and tells her to wait there. The group heads to the Silver Moon Guild to finish their mission. They step inside and find Emo on the floor, crying as she pleads with a man for more time to get the money. What's happening makes it easy to expect the job will end smoothly. Yelling at Amal, the man says she's been promising the same thing for months, and he won't let it slide after waiting so long. She returns to Liar and asks who the man is, and Liar says it's Gerald, a materials merchant tied to the guild's former leader. A young man approaches Gerald and introduces himself. He asks if they can talk so he can find out what's going on. Gerald takes off his hat, greets him, and says he lent the guild 10 gold coins. Since the debt is unpaid, he is claiming the building as collateral. He holds up a contract from the Silver Moon Guild. Emo looks down as Gerald insists that if he doesn't get the money, he'll take the property and the land around it. Gerald says selling the building and land together could cover his losses. He demands that Emo bring the property deed immediately. She refuses, insisting she won't do it under any circumstances, and the man asks why she clings to her role after the guild abandoned her, suggesting it would be wiser to let it go since there is no hope left. Amal lifts her head, expression serious, and says it's not just about duty. Shuru and Liar watch, looking worried. Amal says that, as a half-breed who was shunned by most, the Silver Hoon Guild was the. At first, she really felt part of something bigger. Reflecting on her time there, she remembers the highs and lows and says the good times outweighed the bad. With a gentle look, she says she won't let it go. No matter the cost, in Shuru, seeing her resolve also begins to bring something back. 5 years ago, his family gathered at his grandmother's house, and she remembers it. 2 years after she vanished without a clue, he can't remember everything. He remembers his mom saying she might sell the place because it made no sense to keep it. Hearing that, he dropped to his knees and begged her not to. The house held all his memories of his grandmother. He felt ashamed of acting that way in front of everyone, and all the relatives were stunned by his outburst. Sheer steps forward, ready to act, as Liar shocked asks what he'll do. Gerald tells Emo that feelings don't change the fact a contract is binding and she must follow it. Emo, blank-faced, says she gets it in a pull-up. The deed for Majora's property is about to be handed over. Shiro cuts in before she can reply, asking if he can buy something from her right now. Gerald's eyes go wide with shock as he lifts the killer bear's hide. He immediately recognized the rare material and realized from its color that it came from an even rarer species than he thought. Eager to buy, the merchant asked Shy if he would sell it. The young man politely refuses, saying it is meant for the guild. Amal admits she can't afford it. Shiro says she can pay later when she's able, no rush. Moved by Shiro's kindness, Lyre follows his lead and offers the same deal. The warrior says Amal can pay later. Stammering with excitement, the girl gratefully accepts their generosity. Gerald turns to Emo and pressures her to sell him the hide for 32 gold coins. Frowning, she refuses and insists it is worth 36 coins. The merchant pauses, weighing the price nervously, and after some haggling, the guild's debts are fully paid, leaving Amel with 26 gold coins. The bear's paws added 2 more coins, bringing the Silver Moon Guild's total to 28 coins. Gerald bids farewell, please include the outcome. She says he's eager for their next deal and reminds him she has one final shot. Bowing, she thanks him for his help. The group insists Shiro deserves her thanks. They were simply doing their duty as adventurers. Shortly after, Lyre points out they're still waiting for the mission to finish. Amel Freese is taken aback and turns to Shiro to ask if he is there for the mission too. Casually, he asks whether he should stay, and she tells him to go, saying his part is done. Lee objects, pointing out that the mission was to protect him, so he should stay. Emile flaps her arms, insists he's safe now, and tries to shut the topic down quickly. The warrior presses her, asking if she already spent the mission funds, and Emile stumbles over her words. Emil insists he did not misuse the money. The liar demands she pay on the spot, and the group insists on 30 silver coins for their work. Okay, I'm curious about the amount. Listen's liar says they couldn't charge any less for a task that serious. The young man replies it's not the issue. He paid 100 silver coins and is unsure if the extra 70 were a gilfie. Their eyes meet and Emil tries to slip away, but Lyre grabs her and blocks her escape, demanding answers. The sorcerer conjures a glowing circle with her staff, threatening to burn the rabbit girl, while Keela stands with her arms crossed, clearly annoyed. Even Ralph seems menacing. Lyre snaps his fingers and says he cannot let this slide. The group charges the guild master, who bolts away, frantically dodging their attacks. Relief washes over him as he thinks how lucky he is that he didn't bring Anna. I'm grateful to see the email's true colors. Anna sweeps the stairs at the shop and greets Shiro. Her face lights up as she asks how his life of adventure went. He says it was amazing and offers to tell her the story, and she eagerly agrees to hear it. This account covers every detail and admits the past few days were rough. Anna gets excited and praises his courage for taking on a killer bear. Flustered, Chiru says the Azure Flash group really beat the bear and he only helped a little. She insists she was crucial, saying they would have lost without him. Then a loud knock interrupts and someone shouts his name. He opens the door and Sankara immediately pulls him into a tight hug. He presses his face into her chest as she cries. The mayor asks if he is all right because she defaced a bear during the mission. As he struggles to breathe, a steps in and warns Sankara that he is suffocating, prompting a flustered reaction. The mayor feels his throat tighten, but quickly releases Shiro, letting him breathe again. He tells her to relax, explaining that the adventurers kept him safe, and she sinks with relief when she hears this. Feeling calmer, she asks about the mission and if he found anything valuable on his trip with the Azure Flash. Shiro agrees and says that if the supplies arrive on time, everyone will be eager to check them out because he plans to impress them with the new items. The mayor, wearing a peaceful look, repeats himself and tells Shira he no longer needs to hide his true actions. Stepping closer, she quietly asks if his storage ability is more than a skill and could be a unique object. Pale, she comes back and tries to avoid the question. Sankara smiles and admits he can't fool her, and she explains that while the talent is uncommon, she has met others who have it. This is how she figured it out, and she says that from the moment she first saw him, she sensed something. Sharovs could tell something was different about him. Corner was the young man at Nietzsche's. He asked whether this was a woman's instinct. The mayor says no, admitting she tricked him to test her hunch and that she didn't actually know anyone else without ability. She found it odd that he had so many matches from the start. Shira pauses to think, then yells in surprise. Sanka clasps his shoulder and pats it, noting that in business people are not always truthful, and she warns him to guard his secrets better. The young man admits he was sloppy and promises to pay closer attention from now on, determined not to repeat the mistake. Sankara asks what new items he plans to sell, and Anna says she's curious as well. A secretive shrew reveals an item. It left the mayor stunned that it was real. Shortly after, Sanka relaxes and stretches, celebrating 3 straight days of successful business. At that moment, Liar walks into the shop, says hello, and asks if things are going well. After the mission, he checks the shop's progress. Meska steps in behind him and gives the merchant a quiet, warm wave. The warrior enhances the shop's neatness. Shira says Anna deserves credit for tidying everything up recently. He watches them for a moment and sees the sorceress shyly tug on Liar's sleeve. From how they act, I'm sure they're dating, and I'm happy for them. Feeling a little jealous, Liar says he heard from M that an important figure from an adventurer's guild is coming to the city. The merchant confirms it. Lair says he hopes the guild is trustworthy, piquing Shuru's curiosity. He asks the adventurer if any guilds are corrupt. Liar agrees and explains that even top guilds can have poor reputations. The warriors' names are Fang of the Venom Dragon and Devil's Trident. But he says the labyrinth from Rotters is the worst, and Meskin nods. Anna startles, remembering this was the guild Sankara mentioned earlier. Everyone falls silent for a moment, and Shiro asks whether the mayor knew about the guild's bad reputation. Liar says she may not have. In a small town, even an adventurer would have a hard time getting that kind of news. Shirey realizes there are no phones or social networks here, so missing information is normal. Worried that the arriving guild will cause trouble, he hopes things turn out okay, especially for St. Cora's sake. Anna brings up the guild representative's delay and asks whether he might be lost. She wonders if he's taking his time getting there. Calmly, Shira says he could be doodling, since the route from the other city seems simple enough. It might not be. Still, Sankara has been waiting at the city gate since yesterday. The child says it would be nice if he showed up soon and definitely agrees. Bell chimes, signaling the end of the afternoon. Shira tells Anna they're finished for the day, and the girl nods. The young man says goodbye to a cheerful customer holding the key, who thinks it is still early even, though the young man has decided to close the shop. And just as he is about to lock the door, he hears knocking and opens it. He finds a girl with long hair wearing a uniform and carrying 2 swords, her serious gaze meeting his, while her polite voice apologizes for being late and asks to see the item. Shine gestures for her to look around freely and quickly opens a matchbox. She watches with interest, and he encourages her to try it herself. A gleam of excitement appears in her eyes, and her face lights up as she says she has heard rumors about this product and finds it incredible. Wanting another package, she asks what it is and is told it's a survival blanket that shields against the cold better than a regular blanket. Wrapping her in it, he remembers how the adventures and the mayor first marveled at it. She smiles, surprised that it feels so warm and cozy despite being thin. Then someone points to another item on display. Shur tells her it's a collapsible water bottle. He eagerly shows her more products while she listens closely. She thanks him for the explanations, but says she must go because she is late for an appointment. Before rushing out with a quick goodbye, they left Shiro and Treat behind. A few days later, Anna rushes into the shop calling for Shiro, her frantic expression stopping the young man and prompting him to ask what is wrong. Sanka walks through the city when an unfamiliar man approaches and asks if she is the mayor in a stern voice and with a threatening stance. An inspector from the capital's Adventurers Guild reveals himself, and Sankara shivers as she senses trouble. Shariway and Anna hurried to the meeting spot. The young man had expected to meet her later and was surprised it was happening so soon. Sankara had planned to tour the city and the market with him first, then visit Shiri's shop. Once they reach the spot, things take an unexpected turn. Shiro arrives at a startling sight as Anna explains they urgently need him. Inside the Silver Moon Guild, Sankara is unwell and the Azure Flash adventures look grim, while shadowy figures stand with their backs to Shuru, who wonders if one is the inspector. Sankara whispers to Shuru that the man is hard to handle and urges him to stay calm. Even if provoked, Shir notices her trembling despite her words, tries to ease her, smiles with confidence from past dealings with difficult people, and remains determined to stand firm. Relieved, Sankara introduces Shuru to Gabais, the guild inspector from the capital, speaking in a steady but tense voice and praising Shuru as the city's pride. He greets Gabi and Anna. The inspector scoffs, expecting a seasoned merchant. He sneers and calls her an inexperienced kid hired by Shuru. Anna shrinks back, frightened. Sheer forces a smile to hide his irritation. Gab inspects the Silver Moon Guild, grumbling that it's dirty and that demihumans can't even clean properly. Thiel snaps back, furious, insisting she cleans every day in her spare time. Gabais laughs scornfully, mocking her efforts. Sankara watches, barely holding back her anger. Gaby's ads say people who cannot work do not deserve to live. Keela and Ale shake with fury, and the mayor steps in, redirecting the conversation by offering to show the man's shears products. The man examines the matches and looks impressed for the first time. At least this product is well made, and that brings 10 KR a hopeful smile. Jebasoon carelessly tosses the mapstick onto the floor, sits down, and announces his plan to open a Labyrinth Marauders branch in the city. Sankara is stunned. Ale recommends him for dropping the matchstick inside the guild, but Gabas simply brushes her off. The inspector lays out his demands, declaring that only his guild may operate in the city, and all others must close immediately. Glaring at Ale, he asks if she has anything to say about her tiny, weak guild. When the rabid girl tries to object and says its name is Silvermoon, someone cuts her off rudely, saying the name is irrelevant and it should just shut down. Furious Mill charges at him, but Sankara restrains her again while the inspector continues his demands, insisting on a full tax exemption. He claimed the small city is unprofitable and he will need money to start his new guild. Demanding exclusive rights to sell the matches, he declares that all of Shira's stock now belongs to him and with a smug grin, tosses some boxes onto the table. Shrew watches him, puzzled by his motives. Gebesleen steps closer to the young man, questions whether he is really a merchant, and mocks him as a fool, further angering the inspector. Approaching the store, he says he plans to buy up all the MAF stock. Sanker tries to step in, turns to her with a haughty look, and asks what she wants. The mayor insists she cannot approve exclusive sales, even if they would benefit the city. Gabos laughs at her innocence and argues that NRI's remote location limits trade. But his guild could distribute products across the kingdom, and his greedy smirk made it clear he cared only about profit as Shiru watched. Shiru folds his arms, admits the offer is intriguing but says he's not interested, points out the stock limit, and refuses to sell everything to one guild. Sankar breathes a sigh of relief and says he can't allow the branch in the city. Gibbis's face contorts with rage. In a furious outburst, he hurls a glass bottle at Sankara, narrowly missing her, then yells and demands they tell him who they think he is. He claims the city's guild is already doomed to collapse, while Liar's anger simmers as he watches. Shirin steps forward, hails deeply, and asks everyone to pause. He points out the nearby forest, the monsters, and the rare herbs to show the city's location is valuable. He adds that it serves as a base for adventures. Laughing mockingly, he grabbed Sheru by the tie, labeling him an idiot and calling the city's adventures pathetic and without potential. They claim they can't profit in big cities, so they're here and have targeted areas with little competition. Furious Neska Gross gets a signal from the liar to stay calm. Her aura grows stronger, and everyone feels its weight. Jivas keeps insisting the city's value is absurd, angering the mayor and Mel, and pushes Shiru to decide by arguing a branch in Minish would help the city. It puts its future in Shira's hands. The young man asked for time to think, but snapped that there was no time to waste. The inspector grins wickedly and points at Anna, saying that if she agrees, he could replace the little girl with someone more skilled. Shira falls silent for a moment, then Eiley asks what Gib just said. Convinced he's won, Gabos repeats that he could replace the worthless child and the dirty demi-humans with proper workers. Sheer bursts with pent-up fury and lands a solid punch on Jevis's face, knocking him back, then stumbles, yelling in anger, and rushes the man as everyone watches in amazement. In the heated exchange, Sheriff feels the same familiar feeling he had when he left his job. Earlier, a boss kept taunting a new worker who admired him until Shiur snapped. The words from Gabai's echo, spoken by his former boss in a rage. A powerful punch knocks the inspector back and sends him flying. The Azure Flash team watches in shock while Amal stands nearby. Sankara, visibly shaken, walks up and asks if the Gabais are behaving oddly toward her. The mayor pauses, then sheepishly admits that Gabas touched her inappropriately. Shur's face hardens with rage as he seizes Jebus by the hair. Sankar urges him to stop, insisting it is no longer worth it. The cleric Ralph steps in and calls to Shiru. Shiru turns, accepts Ralph's offer of help, and keeps pulling the inspector along. He remembers what he did when he quit his job. Ralph helped Shira hoist Betray Us and smashes headfirst into the guild's counter, causing the ground to tremble. Shira stands tall and says he despises violence, but he won't. Don't let anyone disrespect his worker. Or when the mayor is exploited, Sankara and Anne are moved and their eyes fill with tears. Shira lands another kick on Gabos and says he's too weak to stay quiet about this. A rush washes over Shiro and embraces him as he cries. Furious, Gavus rises and yells that he will take revenge on the city, boasting loudly. Gabas declares himself leader of the Labyrinth Marauders and threatens everyone. But Sankar stares at him icily and asks if he is ready to start a war with her city. The mayor says if it escalates, she will report it to Marcus Bashar, the territory's ruler. The inspector pales, stammers, and tries to back away. He says if they put him first in match sales, he'll let the incident go. Shira yanks Gabos' ear hard and says he must be deaf because he's not listening. Shiryu flatly refuses to sell and warns that any underhanded move will lead to the destruction of Gibbous' guild. Sankara and the adventurer stand resolute. Shiro shouts, demanding to know if Gavus understands. Gavus drops to his knees. He pleads for a deal, but she says he'll be pickier about his business partners from now on. Gabaskif are asking to discuss the guild's branch. Sankar shrugs it off. Laughing, Liar taunts Gibbos that his greed left him empty-handed. Enraged, the inspector snaps at Liar to be quiet and hurls insults, calling him a feeble adventurer. Liar grabs Gabas by the collar and forces him to be quiet. Shiro asks Lair to avoid violence. Lair points out that Shiro hit Gabas too. Then kicks Gibbas and call him useless. The warrior pointed toward the capital and walked off fuming after giving us a scowl. Liar, Emo, and Ralph Grumble are not satisfied with just that. The mayor suits them, so they suggest letting it go. Sankara glance is a sheer roof used as a backup. A sudden knock at the door grabs Liar's attention. Groaning, he assumes Gabby is back. They open it to find a girl who once visited Shuru's shop, and she asks to come in, saying she knew the mayor was there. That brought her over. Shur recognizes her, and Sankara introduces herself and asks for the girl's identity. She says she is Mirage, a messenger from the guild fairies. The Liar's eyes widen on recognizing a major name. Sankara asks Mirage why she came. Raja smiles and says she wants to set up a guild branch in Nick, her face showing resolve as she asks for a favor. Calm, she meets Sankara's weary stare as he doubts the branch idea is genuine. Imawaran Sankara, hidden behind Shiro, could be a trick offering a friendly warning. Mirage blinked, then spun around suddenly and reached out. Emil's hands trembled as she asked whether the rabbit girl worked at the guild, her eyes bright with excitement. The rabbit girl jumped, startled. Nay stepped in before she could answer and said she wanted to talk to her too. Nay said that if the Silver Moon Guild merged with hers, Emil's pay would go up a lot. She raised her arm high and promised a big pay raise. Emo watched the gesture, heart pounding and eyes widening. Curious, the rabbit girl asked whether her pay would actually increase. Nay nodded immediately, assuring her she would earn 5 times more. Nay gave a bold grin to show she meant business. Emo flinched and stepped back at first, but then knelt before Nay. Nay announced that the Silver Moon Guild would join Fair's blessing as a branch. Her voice trembling, she clutched Nay's legs and pleaded with the mayor to approve her choice. Sankar froze, stunned by what she heard. After a pause, the mayor asked Shira for her thoughts. Folding his arms, the young man said they should at least hear Nay's offer before deciding, and San Cardinot nodded and invited them into her office to talk. They all sat with cups of tea while the mayor asked Nay why she made that choice. Nay said that days earlier venturers had found a dungeon with a strange map that showed a continent no one had recorded, and she thought it came from an ancient civilization advanced in magic. That could be a big discovery. Her eyes gleamed as she spoke, and when she looked at Shuru and Sankara, Nace's face grew stern. She said the key detail was coming up. A map showed ancient sites in the forest east of the city. Maybe lost kingdoms existed. She spread the map on the table and pressed her hands on it. Amazed, Sankara asked if it was real, her voice laced with shock. Nay confirmed this firmly, saying the Labyrinth Marauders were already eyeing the city to take sole control of the ruins. Picking up a small figure from the table, she tipped it over to show how the Marauders had failed. They tried to seize control, but were stopped by the inspector's strict conditions. Negrind and the Setter Guild, by contrast, wanted to partner with the city for fair exploration. After thinking it through, they decided the city was the ideal place for their plan because of its location and one key detail. Curious, Shira leaned forward and asked what made the city stand out. Nay replied that the silver moon gilded the city. The moon being the only one around was the main reason. Taking it in, they could turn it into a fair's blessing branch without building a new one, speeding up the ruins project. She was impressed by Shiri's shop because his goods were excellent and would boost their efforts. Smiling, she bowed and asked Sherwood to consider opening a shop branch in the guild. Her steady stare made Sankara swallow hard. The mayor asked what they wanted in exchange for opening a guild branch there. Her tone was sharp. The girl looked puzzled and shy as she described the problems Gabais had caused. Nez's eyes flashed with anger at the inspector's demands. Shira noted that even with the branch approved, the inspector had insulted him. Senka added that she would also be harassed by Jebus, who was awful. Shocked and even called it unacceptable, but Kinsang Kur. With Emel's agreement, they wouldn't need a new base. They would still need a secure place for an adventurer's inn. Emel promised fair pay and the taxes followed city rules, and Sanker studied them closely. She asked her name to be sure, offered her hand with a small smile, and said it would be great to work together, and Nay shook it warmly, eyes bright with excitement as she thanked her for the trust and approval. The Silver Moon Guild, which had nearly gone bankrupt, joined the country's largest guild. A few days later, Shur's shop was as busy as ever. While helping a customer one day, he asked Anna to fetch some large matches, but she did not reply and stood frozen with anxiety. Shira called her again but got no response, so he went over and spoke softly into her ear, and the startled little girl jumped, turned to him, apologized, and asked if he needed anything. Shur sighed softly, told her again that he needed the large matches, and hurried off to get them. They quickly lost focus again. The young man began counting coins and saw she was lost in thought, so he called her name again, noticed her delay, and asked if something was wrong. She looked around nervously, her small hands trembling, unsure if she should say anything. Without warning, she fell to her knees, tears running down her face, her voice breaking as she admitted she needed money. Just then a stack of coins clattered to the floor, and she knelt again to take his hands. He held them gently and looked at her with quiet relief, asking how much she needed. Anna faltered, started to apologize, and said she didn't want to cause trouble. Shira looked at her warmly, gently patted her head and comforted her while he smiled and said it was okay. She didn't need to feel bad because asking for help took real courage, and she admired that. He asked if something was wrong with her mother. Anna froze, visibly upset. Before she could answer, Lyre burst in and loudly called Shuru to come eat. Lyre stopped short when he saw the girl's face and said sorry for interrupting. Shortly after, Sankara entered and asked the young man to talk about the city's growth. She paused when she saw it happening and apologized. Lyre asked if they should come back later. She went back to Anna and asked for her opinion. Wiping her tears, the little girl smiled and said it was okay for everyone to stay. Seeing the group, the young man decided they should sit together to listen to her and offer help. Lyre tapped his chest confidently and said they could handle it because Ralph was good at this. Sankar also stepped up as mayor, telling Anna she could rely on her if there was any trouble. The little girl's eyes filled with emotion. Shrewd said he wanted to help too. At last, Anna began to speak through sobs, saying her mother was ill. Back at their house, her mother coughed hard, and the flowers she'd picked began to droop. Anna's mind drifted back to age 4, when she lived happily in a small house with her parents, and could still picture their little home and the meals they shared, where she always sat beside her favorite teddy bear. Then one day everything fell apart, as war suddenly swept through their city. Their warm home went up in flames, and even her beloved toy turned to ashes. Her mother held her tightly, shielding her amid the ruins. Her father appeared carrying the small teddy bear, now worn and dirty. Sadness weighed on his face, the loss of everything they owned crushing them. For Anna, the worst pain was watching her father leave as a soldier. He hugged her and her mother tightly, promised he would come back soon, and then left them alone. The war lasted only 6 months, but years passed, and Anna's father never came back. At 6, her mother told her they had to move to a new city. The stubborn girl refused. She feared that if they left, her father would not find them when he returned. When her mother saw her daughter's fear, she couldn't argue and simply hugged her, crying. Anna didn't know what to say or do. Soon after, they left the city, crossed borders, and walked day and night until they reached Nick. The curious little girl asked her mother why they had come there. Our mother said it was a place without war where they could be safe. Life in the border city was harsh, and Anna could not bear to lose anyone else. Anna's mother worked long days in the fields and often skipped her own meals so Anna would not go hungry. Over time, her mother's health declined, and her body grew weak and ill. Her frequent apologies to Anna made the young girl feel guilty for putting so much strain on her mother. Each night, Anna clutched her teddy bear and sobbed alone on the floor of her tiny room until she had no tears left. Determined to make a change, she decided to grow it quickly. She put her toy aside, looked in the mirror, and went out to sell the few flowers she had gathered. Her efforts earned her a permit to sell in the city. Each morning Anna left with her flower basket and did not return until after dark. She walked through the market until one day she met Shiru, and his presence immediately caught her eye when he bought her flowers. Shiru bought her flowers and helped her get a job. Because of this, Anna eased her mother's burdens, which gave her great joy, quietly thanking the gods she believed in with a heartfelt prayer of gratitude, and knew immediately how to use her first wage of 10 silver coins. Rushing through the market, she found an adventurer who had once said he owned a potion that could heal any illness. Without hesitation, Anna spent all her money to buy it and handed the potion to her mother, saying it came from Shiru, who had drunk it, and that it was full of hope. That hope soon turned into disappointment when the potion didn't help her mother at all. Even after finishing, Anna was overcome with despair. Focused only on saving her mother from the disease, her thoughts clouded, and she realized money was the key. A sufficient amount could get her mother into a place that offers real treatment. Deciding this, Anna turned to Shiru and silently hoped he would help save her mother's life, even though he disliked her. Gathering her courage, she asked him for a loan, expecting harsh judgment. She was surprised Cher did not belittle her. He reached out and gently patted her head. At that moment, Anna felt the warmth. After he listened closely to her story, she hadn't known in ages. Shiru breathed slowly and with a kind look said he understood her situation. Anna bowed her head, her small frame shaking slightly as her sorrowful face showed the burden she carried. Silence filled the room until Lyre smashed the wall beside him, cracking some bricks, his eyes blazing with rage and his voice thick with anger as he demanded to know who had sold the potion to the soldier. Lyre tightened his fists and swung at the air, vowing that if he caught the culprit, they would pay a heavy price for tricking an innocent child, and that he would hit them 100 times without stopping. Before he could continue, Neska stepped in, hit him on the head with her staff, and sternly told him not to break other people's property. Meanwhile, Ralph knelt to Anna's level and spoke to her calmly but firmly. Ralph said that, though it was hard to hear, the potion Anna gave her mother could not cure diseases, and the little girl looked up in confusion and asked what he meant. The cleric patiently explained that healing potions only heal external wounds, and cure potions neutralize poisons. No potion can cure illnesses. Anna blinked several times, struggling to take it in, then protested with an innocent look. The adventurer who sold Anna the potion had promised her mother would recover. Ralph bowed his head and apologized, admitting the adventurer had deceived her with a useless product. Anna repeated the cleric's words slowly to show she understood the truth. Soon tears filled her eyes and ran down her cheeks as the harsh reality sank in, and Ralph felt a sharp pain in his chest watching her. Meanwhile, Lyre became furious and smashed the window. Shouting that he had tracked down the fraud and wanted him punished, he asked Ralph to handle things as Neska and Keela joined him to catch the culprit. The others went with Anna to check on her mother, and Shiru followed behind with a stern expression. While they walked, Shiru thought about Anna's words about the illness, and Sankara grew pensive as she remembered the pharmacist calling it a disease that ruined lives, deepening her sense of its severity. Shiru quietly took Ralph aside and asked about the illness. I learned from Ralph that it slowly weakened the body, the limbs decaying and all strength draining away. Experts still couldn't figure out how it spread. Shira shivered at the grim news, realizing the danger was worse than she thought. After walking a little farther, Anna pointed to a modest house. Shiru marveled at how Anna left each day to sell flowers on the outskirts for her mother's sake. Anna took a deep breath to steady herself, held the door open with a bright smile, cheerfully announced she was home, and in a warm, loving voice welcomed Shiru inside and proudly presented him to her mother. Despite her frail state, Stella sat up and gave him a gentle, welcoming look. She thanked Shira softly for looking after Hannah. Instead, he insisted he owed her his thanks. Stella still struggled to get up despite her condition. Though Stella apologized for looking unkempt, Anna and Shiro quickly urged her not to push herself, insisting her health mattered more. Even as she argued it would be rude to stay in bed while guests were here, Anna firmly told her to rest. Stella noticed Sankara, who introduced herself as the town's mayor. It made Stella look worried and ask why she had come. Ralph replied that they had come to see Anna's situation firsthand because they cared. On Stella's side, sorry for troubling them, but Sankar realized she was the one who felt sorry. As mayor, frustrated for not eating everyone in need, she looked regretful, while Stella appreciated her despite being an outsider. Stella then asked Anna when she had become a friend of the mayor and why she had kept it secret. Anna beamed and said she had not only met Sankara but also Shiru, Ralph, Lyre, Keela, and Neska. Amazing adventurers, she said with a wide grin, thrilled to have so many friends, and it warmed Stella's heart as she watched her daughter's joy. Seeing her daughter so happy warmed A's heart. She asked her mother if she had eaten and suggested making soup for their guests. Stella said if cooking was needed she would do it herself, but a man insisted it was unnecessary because she loved cooking and wanted to handle it all. She decided to go to the river for water, and Ralph offered to come along. After watching them for a moment, Stella asked Sankara to step outside because she needed to talk privately. With Shuru beside him, he looked at Stella and waited for her to speak, and she hesitated briefly. With a serious, firm look, she admitted she had a favor to ask him. Looking him straight in the eye, she asked if he would care for her daughter if anything happened to her. The sudden request stunned Shira, leaving her momentarily speechless. Stella saw the shock on his face and apologized for making such an abrupt, possibly selfish plea, knowing her time was running out. Unable to stop worrying about Anna's future, her eyes grew sad while she asked whether the little girl had already told him about the disease. She nodded yes, and the mother asked softly whether Anna cried when she talked about it. He said yes, though Anna had been crying even before she started, and Stella closed her eyes and breathed deeply, shaken because she had long feared this. She knew how hard Anne had tried, even after Anne could no longer work and had to rely on the girl to survive. Being a mother who couldn't help her child hurt her deeply. The worst part was watching Anna force a smile to keep her from worrying. Recently, Stella noticed something new. Seeing Anna genuinely happy as they chatted caught her attention. Curiosity getting the better of her, she asked her daughter what was making her so happy. The girl answered excitedly, her eyes shining, saying she now had a very kind big brother and was thrilled about it. At that moment, Stella felt a deep understanding as she looked at Shiru and saw how much Shiru resembled Anna's father. Seeing him enter earlier, she felt an odd certainty that the man who had left had returned. Shir felt his chest tighten and said sorry, aware he was there instead of Anna's real father and feeling guilty. Stella smiled weakly and told him not to apologize, that wasn't what she meant. His being there helped her remember her husband's face, which she had begun to forget, and that memory comforted her. Tears filled her eyes and her voice trembled as she said she was certain she would soon find her husband when her time came. She stared, his eyes widened, and he asked what she meant by that. Stella sighed, her face peaceful, and said her body would not last much longer, so she likely had little time left. Struggling to stand, she looked determined and asked Shiru again to please take care of Anna when she was gone. Anna seemed strong and brave, but deep down she was still a crying little girl. Before she could finish, Stella suddenly lost her balance as her body weakened and stepped back quickly. He stepped forward and caught her before she hit the ground. For a moment, they stared at each other. Feeling awkward from the sudden closeness, he asked if she was okay, and Stella, still a bit dazed, nodded slightly as he eased her back onto the bed. He noticed something and asked to briefly touch her foot, and she immediately blushed. Her cheeks flushed and her pulse quickened. Despite her shyness, she closed her eyes and agreed reluctantly, puzzled by why he asked. Shira watched closely. Soon after, his suspicion proved correct. Stella opened her eyes, confused, and asked what he meant. She nervously and awkwardly asked if he liked her legs, and he stumbled over his words, flushed, and quickly denied it, saying it wasn't that at all. He was finally starting to understand the disease that ruined his life and might even know how to fix it. Stella's eyes widened in shock, barely believing what she heard because she had never thought a cure was possible until now. Tears fell down her face as she cried quietly because deep inside, she still didn't want to die or leave her young, innocent daughter alone in the world. Shiru gripped her hands tightly and comforted her, assuring her she wouldn't die and could stay with Anna once he sorted things out. At that moment, the bedroom door swung open and Sankara stepped in, asking if they were done talking, and Anna and Ralph were right behind her. When they saw it, their eyes widened as Shiru clasped Stella's hands with a determined look, leaving Sankara and Ralph speechless and staring at the young man, unsure what to make of it. Meanwhile, Shiru froze, panic racing through his mind as he tried to figure out how to explain the mess. Cleaning it up wasn't easy. Sankara looked menacing and Ralph gripped his weapons, ready for trouble. The men were confused and didn't know what was happening, and Stella, still drying her tears, stood among them. Shira felt a huge wave of relief when she realized Stella had smoothed things over. Imagining the disaster, she stayed quiet. He coughed to steady himself, gathered his thoughts, and said that in his homeland, the disease of a ruined life was called barbarity. The name surprised everyone, and he continued, explaining that it stems from a shortage of essential vitamins in the body. When severe, the vitamin deficiency caused numbness in the arms and legs and stopped movement, and the solution was simply to restore the missing vitamins. Anna lit up and asked if there was a drug to heal her mom. Shiru grinned and said yes. He remembered his grandmother's advice to help people in need. Determined, he used his alchemy skill to convert his money into yen and went to buy the medicine. Later, he returned with a bottle of pills and told Stella that, despite its plain appearance, it could cure her. Both the mayor and the cleric examined the bottle with interest, never having seen anything like it. Stella paused and asked if the medicine was expensive. She just smiled and told her not to fret, since Anna's happiness covered the cost. Her attempt to argue failed as he stood firm. He said Anna had helped him a lot when he first got to town, and now it was his chance to give back. He handed her a pill and a glass of water, and Stella swallowed it, eyes wet with gratitude and filled with hope. A month later, the bell rang to mark another day. Anna returned home with Shiru. Her mother greeted her when she opened the door. Stella stood, her eyes widening as she eagerly asked if her mom felt better. Smiling warmly, Stella admitted she was surprised at how good she felt. He rushed to Stella and asked if they could split the bet like before. Stella agreed at once. From then on, the mother and daughter slept together every night. They held each other tightly as tears of joy streamed down their faces. While Anisad was still arranging her hair, and he was sorry for causing her so much fear and vowed they would never part again. Shearer stood nearby in silence, filled with genuine joy as he watched the two finally reunite. Right then, Shearer thought of his grandmother and pictured how proud she'd be if she could see him now, knowing he had rescued someone. Later that evening, the young man stood on his balcony with a drink in hand, thinking back on the day's amazing events. Thanks to the vitamins, Stella fully recovered. Anna could now chat with her mom, cook meals, pick flowers, and play however you like. Shirin watched the little girl grow stronger, her happiness spreading to everyone nearby. The Silvermoon Guild received official status through the fairy's blessing. From then on, the Azure Flash Group helped the main guild with forest missions. Shiru thought about his earnings and realized he had made about 50 million yen in the past 2 months, and if that continued for a year, he could save enough to quit working. The idea of living quietly at home without work thrilled him. Sankara suddenly appeared behind him. She caught him off guard and almost made him spill his drink. She grinned and said good night. Still shaken, he grumbled that her scare had nearly stopped his heart. The mayor chuckled, apologized, and asked what he was sipping. Shira told her it was a drink from his homeland and offered some, which she gladly took, and they chatted lively as they sipped together. While talking, the mayor wondered if she should patch up his head. Before he could answer, she pulled him close, rested his head on her lap, and he tried to object. Sankara teased him when he admitted he softens with praise, leaving him red-faced as he agreed. She hushed him as she ran her fingers through his hair, and he asked if she'd had too much to drink. Sankara said warmly that she really appreciated him coming to the city. It wasn't about the reward. She said he should just ask if he ever needed anything. Shira stood and said it wasn't necessary because he had only done what he could. Sankar looked at him and said she got it. His singing was not greedy. Flushed with embarrassment, Cairo quickly told her not to see him as noble, admitting he loved money and was actually quite selfish while recalling his grandmother's lessons. Sankar smiled, said his grandmother must have been an amazing person, and asked her name. Shiro Paz previously said it was Eraizo Hamo. Sankara repeated the name as her eyes widened with sudden realization. Grabbing Shiri's shoulders, she shook him hard and demanded to know whether he was Aresu's grandson, the immortal witch. Shiro, taken aback by the outburst, asked if she knew his grandmother. Sankar explained that everyone on the continent had heard of the famous immortal witch, but only a few had met her, and she was one of them. Puzzled, Shiro listened as Sankara said she had seen Aresu at last year's harvest festival, where the witch suddenly appeared in the town square drinking and dancing. It was hard to believe that 7 years had passed since Shiro's grandmother vanished. Just as he was about to protest, Sankara cut him off, saying she clearly remembered the witch gathering star fragments to forge a magical sword called Mel Gibson. Shiro paused, overwhelmed by the flood of details, as the sword's name stirred a faint childhood memory. A poster of a well-known actor hung in his grandmother's home, and when he asked about it, she said he was her favorite and even kissed the picture. Still reeling, Sanka admitted she could hardly believe her grandmother was that witch. It made sense because he often arrived with mysterious medicines and strange objects. Curious, she asked if he had already reunited with his grandmother, but Shiro shook his head and said he hadn't seen her in years. She stepped out onto the balcony, took a deep breath, and shouted, certain she was still alive. Before returning to her house in the present world, at his grandmother's house now, sheer curtains lie on the floor. He stared at the altar holding her photo, unable to accept that she might still be alive, his mind spinning as he studied the picture of the old woman who loved striking poses with a peace sign. Free of others' opinions, he took a steady breath, sorted through his feelings, and looked at the photo again, certain he could find her at the harvest festival. Determined, he rose and stepped through the portal back into the other world, remembering that just a day earlier, during a talk with Sankara, he had learned something astonishing. She'd reveal his grandmother wasn't just an oddball but a famous, legendary witch, and the mayor was reflecting on her disappearance. She told Chiru she understood his urgency to find her, but suggested he stay in Nin a little longer because his grandmother had appeared at last year's harvest festival. Shiro realized that if it had happened once, it could happen again. His grandmother adored festivals, so she was likely to show up this year. Sankara confirmed his hunch, saying the festival would be extra special because the city was marking its 120th anniversary, and the mayor was planning a big event and had asked him to help. Weeks later, with only 2 months left until the celebration, Shiru, a festival enthusiast, began preparing. Eager to join Car's event, he soon felt stuck, unsure what unique contribution to make since food seemed too ordinary with so many stalls and contests already planned. Traditional games were out because they'd be everywhere, so he thought long and hard. Scratching his head in frustration, he tried to pull a fresh idea from his past. Sudden inspiration made him grab several cameras and rush off. After Harignath left the store, Shira set down the gear and Anna, puzzled, scrunched her face and asked what it was all about. Shira grinned, called it a fair question, then eagerly explained that the cameras were for a new product called the heat cell. The little girl still seemed lost. Noticing her confusion, he took a hands-on approach and asked Anna too. He snapped a photo and showed her the result, and she stared with wide eyes, wondering how the image had become trapped in the paper. Sherry chuckled at her own amazement if it shrank inside. The speaker clarified that the device could instantly turn people and scenes into pictures, making it a perfect chance to try it. After asking Anna to smile, he took several photos while she admired the pictures. She soon begged to learn how to use it herself. After fumbling a bit, she clumsily took a photo of Shiru and asked excitedly whether it had worked. After some effort, he confirmed the picture turned out great. Radiant Anna grew even more excited, eager to take more photos of him. The young man warmed to it, posing a few times, but he said he'd had enough after a handful of photos. Anna noticed another camera and asked what it was, so someone explained it was a Polaroid, leaving her amazed at the variety of cameras. The young man nudged her lightly to get her attention. When she looked his way, he took a picture of her, teasing that he'd caught her off guard. Staring at the picture, the little girl complained that she didn't look good in it. An idea came to her, and she called out to Shuru. As he turned, she quickly snapped a Polaroid of him, laughing that it was her chance to catch him off guard. He raised an eyebrow and wondered if she was trying to get back at him. When he saw the photo of himself giving a peace sign, he noticed how much he looked like his grandmother. At that moment, Stella came into the shop and thanked Shuru for taking care of her daughter that day. Grinning, he asked how she was settling into the new place and whether she still felt tired from the move. Stella replied that she wasn't struggling at all, thanks to his support. Shiro found a corporate apartment for her and her daughter near the shop. Anna seizes the moment to tease her mom for being awful at keeping things tidy. Stella flushed, told her daughter to hush, then chuckled and said they could rely on him if they needed help. Anna, feeling a little shy, thanks Tim sincerely. Playfully, she said he was probably just as bad at organizing, leaving Shiro at a loss for words as he scratched his head and said story. Beaming at him, the little girl gave an enthusiastic wave goodbye, and Shiri waved back. I watched them lead with a calm, satisfied smile. Now the Silver Moon Guild had joined the powerful fairy, Blessing Guild. Shiro remembered his first visit when all he could hear was Emil crying behind her desk. It was a stark contrast to the lively scene he saw as he stepped inside. The place had been completely transformed. Several adventurers talk enthusiastically, sharing tips about the forest. The young man could hardly believe the guild that had nearly shut down 2 months ago was now one of the kingdom's busiest. Seeing him, he hurried over and asked if he'd come just to see her. The bunny girl patted Shiro and, with a cheeky grin, wondered if he had brought her an expensive gift. Irritated, Shiro told her to stop, but she kept teasing him, saying that if he wanted, she would agree to be his wife and live a lavish life with him. Already picturing herself married, living in a grand castle and riding in carriages, or soaring on a dragon, tossing gold coins down to the crowd. Shuru turned her down firmly, but Emma pressed on, saying he could do whatever he wanted with her, and that despite how she looked she was actually quite loving, and as she spoke she reached for her collar and adjusted it in a teasing way. His actions made Shiruf panic and beg her to stop, and desperate to get out of the mess he asked if she had work to do. Imal shot back with a sly grin, saying she was about to take a break before Shuru could respond. The bunny girl pinned him against the wall and asked if he wanted to join her for a drink in a quiet, dark room. Trying to escape, they attempted to shear off with the anchor, but it failed. He took her hand and guided her away, remembering his grandmother's lesson never to be alone in a dark room with a woman who can't handle her liquor. It had been her last wish, but he had recently learned his grandmother was still alive. Nearby adventurers laughed when they saw Ino was at it again with her antics. The bunny girl smiled plainly and said that Shuru was still gripping her hand passionately. If she hadn't pushed him, he would have dragged her into a dark room himself. She leaned in closer, teasing him and saying she knew deep down he liked her. Sweat beaded on the young man's forehead as he leaned in too close, causing Shuru to panic and pull away. Shuru called for help, saying an octopus was attacking him. Keela the scout suddenly stepped out from behind a mill and swiftly kicked the rabbit girl. The blast sent her soaring into a wooden barrel. She chirped again, declaring the awful octopus trap defeated, and Keela checked he was okay. With tears of relief, the young man confirmed he was fine. Meanwhile, adventurers at the guild's bar lifted their beer mugs in a cheerful toast. Sheer thanked Killa for saving him from Aile's grasp, and the cat girl said rabbit people get wildered during a full moon. El denied this, but Nesca the sorcerer felt sorry for Shuru, noting it didn't seem like a good relationship. Ralph teased that Miss Isle nearly took a bite of the shears for the forbidden fruit. The rabbit girl proudly chomped on a chicken leg to prove it. To their surprise, the group asked how she was still around. Hale casually said she didn't like being excluded. Laegiel's bell rang as two adventurers started brawling, and the others eagerly placed bets on the winner. Shares stood, suggesting they had stopped fighting. Lear chuckled, saying fights among adventurers were common, almost like a greeting. Tension in town had been growing recently, he added. Sheer asked why, and Lair said the forest expedition had pulled adventurers from across the kingdom, the very best. After 2 months, no ruins had been found, and as they spoke, the fighting continued. One adventurer swam toward his rival, who barely dodged and countered with a sharp kick. Note that everyone seemed stretched thin and later agreed. With little to do in the small town, frustration grew. Hiding under the table, a girl nudged Shuru, who quickly begged her not to lift her shirt again. Pouting, she promised she wouldn't and reassured him she would never do that with so many people around. Grinned slightly and say Lair meant sure, didn't understand when he mentioned distractions. Ale laughed and called him clueless, clearly referring to BRS. Lair blushed and denied it. He insisted it wasn't true, but when pressed he asked why he was so rattled. Nesca stamped on Liar's foot with her heel and scolded him for talking nonsense. He tried to explain, but the sorcerers squeezed harder, making the warrior yelp in pain. The adventurers' fight was finally over. She stepped in, her strong presence filling the room, and with a stern glare she demanded to know what was happening. The fighters froze and insisted they weren't fighting. Spotting Shuru, he apologized for barging in and marveled at how amazing she was. En spotted Ale under the table and called her out. The rooted girl shivered at En. Smiling menacingly, they asked whether she'd been there all along and why she hadn't stopped the fight sooner. Ale's tamer offered no explanation, and no one accepted it. She hauled Ale outside without delay as the rooted girl shouted for Shuru to save his future wife, pleading to take any punishment rather than suffer a pay cut. After things calmed down, Lara approached Cheru with a request. He explained that while searching the forest for ruins, he came across rare flowers. After the group filled Shiro in on the mission, he excitedly said he'd tag along. Lair asked if he was certain. Shiro confirmed but said he would need protection. The warrior grinned and promised they were tougher than ever. Everyone raised their mugs again and clinked them in a cheerful toast. A soft breeze swept the flower-filled field, leaving her captivated as she gazed across the vast landscape and couldn't help but grin while saying how amazing and special the flowers were. Nesca, the group's sorceress, gently inspects the blooms and says in a calm, knowing voice that they are Apsara, a rare flower that only grows where the water is perfectly pure. She says the plants are tender and fragile, but very valuable for making potent healing potions, and after she speaks the group decides to rest for a while, lying among the flowers. Across the field, Lyre folds her arms and stares at the trio with a disapproving frown, and in a teasing tone, the warrior says she expected Nesca and Killa to nap at the first chance. She is surprised to see him so calm and nearly dozing, and when she wakes him, he apologizes, saying their long, exhausting trek has left him worn out and he just needs a short rest. Lyre shrugs off his words, saying they must finish their work before the sun sets. Only then can they relax as much as they want. A week earlier, the group got this job when Azure Flash Guild members found those rare flowers while exploring. They found the Apsara were essential to making the kingdom's finest healing potions, highly valued by doctors and healers. However, there was a catch. The flowers faded quickly on the return trip. They lost their power before delivery, despite Nesca watering them and using magic to keep them fresh. Nothing worked, and the team almost abandoned the mission. At that point, Lyre had a clever idea and asked Shirub for help. Because the young man has a rare spatial storage ability, he can hold huge anons of items without feeling their weight, and anything stored there stays perfectly preserved, frozen in time to keep it from spoiling or weakening. Lyre says they have gathered enough flowers for now, but then she notices something. Suddenly she realizes Killa has slept through their whole conversation and was unaware, and before Lyre can wake her, the cat hears a strange sound, turns serious, and warns the group that something is coming. At once everyone tenses and draws their weapons. Soon a swarm of giant, frightening insects called roserbitals appears overhead, and her eyes widen at the sight. Confronted by the massive insects, the shearers stare in shock while the Lyre counts them in his head, guessing there are at least 17, a number that seems promising. Lyre steps forward and tells everyone to stay completely still and quiet. She examines the beasts more closely and finds many wounded, their bodies marked with deep gashes. Nesca examines the scene and concludes the cuts were caused by a wind-slicing spell, and the group's cleric notes the dripping fluid indicates the injuries are fresh. Before they can find out what attacked the insects, Lyre warns that the beetles have spotted them. With no options left, Lyre quickly tells Roll to guard shrews. Nesca begins casting a spell, while the sorceress says she is already on it. A quick flick sends a blazing fire arrow from her staff. The strike sends several beetles crashing down in flames, and Roll moves to shield Shuru. A warning assures Shuru he will not be harmed, but Killa hurls several sharp knives at the beetles and is stunned when the blades harmlessly bounce off, and before she can react, the insects surround her. Tapping the screen to call Nesca for help, the sorceress stays calm as ever and casts a new spell that unleashes a fierce fire blast, turning a few more foes to ash. Shur realizes that fire is these insects' weakness and quickly hatches a plan. Shira dashes off, leaving an anxious Ralph who yells at her not to act rashly and warns that the bug spray from earlier won't stop these creatures. Shiro grins and says he has a new trick up his sleeve. The young man pulls a small lighter from his pocket and grabs a can of gas spray. He sparks them together to create a massive flame. The fire shoots through the air, striking the beetles and turning them to dust in moments while he crafts a makeshift flamethrower. Shuru glances at his friends and warns them that the stunt was very risky and not something to try at home. Still amazed, Lyre wonders if it was magic, but before Shuru can reply, he nods to Ralph to take out a lingering insect, and the cleric instantly smashes the beast with his mighty mace, cracking its tough shell. Only 6 foes remain, and Lyre cheerfully says they're close to victory, but then the beetles start grouping up and preparing their assault. They shift their attack toward Nesca, and Shira readies flying thrower, then realize the sorceress is too close to the insects, and any flame would hit her too. Before he can think up another plan, a beetle charges at Nesca, and a flash Sheru sprints over, shoving her aside. He takes the hit instead, the insect's claws sinking into him. Panicked, Lyre yells at Shuru to leap into the river to shake off the creature. With no options left, he drowns. The water ploy works, freeing him from the beetle, but Shira is swept away by the rushing current. Nesca summons water spirits with a spell to shield the young man. The Lyre panics as it watches Shuru being pulled toward the riverbank. Azure Flash's leader sets out to track him down and hopes Shira holds on. As he comes to, Sherry worries whether his friends will rescue him. A woman's voice suddenly calls out, telling him to stay strong. Shur, coughing up the water he swallowed, hears the girl cheer that he's alive. He is stunned when she cuts him off and asks whether he has ever met a fairy. Excited, he asks whether she is really a fairy, since he has never met one, and marvels at how real she seems. A hand-sized figure with lawn-like hair and glowing wings that shimmer in the light hovers close, flutters gracefully, shyly tells him not to gawk at her like that, and feeling rude, Shiro quickly says sorry. Crossing her arms, she stares at him, waiting for more. Confused, he fumbles and says it's nice to meet her, but the small, annoyed fairy says that's not it. She shook her head and wondered what had pulled him from the waterfall. Pointing out that the heat of the plunge was over, he ended up dead without her help. Hearing this, Shiro immediately thanks her and bows respectfully. The fairy puts her hands on her hips and asks why he was in the river, as if it were some strange pastime. He quickly denies it and explains it was a long tale that unfolded suddenly. After listening to him, she shakes her head and notes that he really was attacked by monsters, and says it's risky business, teasing him by calling him weak. She asks where he's from and answers that he comes from Men. It is a small town called Norwich, west of where they are now. Her eyes widen with wonder as she says the name again. Norwich, the place where humans live. She asks if he could bring her there. Surprised, the young man looks at her and wonders why she is so interested, asking whether she has ever been to the town before. The fairy frowns as if asking whether that means no. Rob nods and agrees to take her, but first he wants to know if she has any friends in town. The fairy beams and says she knows a human guy. She speaks excitedly about him and says he was a little taller than Shiro. She had stunning eyes and a warm smile, with both her hair and eyes the color of the sky. Eager to know, she asks whether Shura knows him. The young man replies that being the same race doesn't mean everyone knows each other, and then asks the other man's name. Pausing to think, the little fairy shakes her head and admits she doesn't know what to say. She tells him that before meeting Shiro, that human was the only person she had met, so she chose something simple. She had named him Quaman, and Shiri wondered whether he had been a hunter or an adventurer. The young man notices her tone sounds almost romantic and asks whether they were a couple. The fairy taps his forehead lightly, makes a face, and asks whether he is stupid. People said a fairy and a human could never be together like that. They were just very close friends. Shiro grins and says they must be best friends, and the fairy agrees. She answers immediately, without doubt. The young man pauses and asks whether she knows the forest well. Seeing her relaxed, the fairy agrees, explaining she was born and raised in the giant forest. Seeing an opening, Shiras offers a deal. If she guides him through this part of the forest, he'll take her to Norwich. He asks for her opinion. Her eyes light up as she asks if he's serious, and if he'll really take her to the city. Then she accepts his plan without a second thought. She promises to keep Shrew safe along the way and tells him to watch her skills. Raising her hand, the girl releases a powerful gust of wind that slices through the air and knocks down a few nearby trees. Seeing how powerful her attack is, she reels back, eyes widening in shock, and he asks if that was really needed. Hands on her hips, the fairy admits she can't control her magic well, but says strength is what matters, and she flexes her arms to show off. Bragging, she tells him that earlier a group of rhinoceros beetles attacked, but she scared them all off by herself. In hindsight, Shira realizes she was the one who hurt the insects, and he says the mystery is finally solved. Shira offers his hand and says they have a deal, properly introducing himself to the fairy. The girl taps her chin, shakes her head, and says his name is odd but accepts it anyway. She then says her full name and smiles. He declares that from now on he'll be her commander, but Patty crosses her arms and pouts, says she doesn't like it, and suggests Shiru call her Cheek instead. Laughing, the young man says yes, Chief, to humor her. Patty grins, pleased, and tells them to say it again. Shira calls out loudly to her chief, and the fairy spins in the air around him, thrilled. Shiryu watches her and asks if she likes it, then calls her chief again. Patty frowns and asks why he talks like that. The young man teases that that's how a lackey would speak. But an annoying Patty says she doesn't like it and tells him to stop. He suggests calling her captain, and she snaps back, no way. Shiro chokes, calls her mighty, and offers to be her servant, saying he'll do his best to follow her orders to thank her for saving his life, but she says she doesn't like that either. Night falls and they sit around the campfire they lit, while Patty watches the flickering flames and thinks about whether Shira misses his friends. Looking up at the starry sky, the young man says he naturally treats them as close companions, and while he talks to them, he imagines his friends might be out looking for him. Patty declare, excited, has made a permit to help him find them. She keeps asking questions because she is unsure, but the fairy insists that as leader it is her duty. He should rely on her to handle everything, and she asks if the young man is hungry, realizing he hasn't eaten all day. Patty puts her hands on her hips and says that since he's under her command, she'll give him something to eat. A blinding light flashes before his eyes. He blinks a few times, and when his vision clears, Shira is amazed. Pate asks if something is wrong or if he is not hungry, but the young man is marveling that she also has the ability to store things, which makes it even more fascinating. Patty summons a large glowing magic circle that shines and hums with power before a portal opens. A gateway appears in the air before her, and with a gentle motion she draws out a fruit. Her eyes sparkle with playful delight as she looks at Shiro, who stares back in shock and wonder, and the fairy tilts her head slightly with a curious grin, saying he probably hasn't seen anyone use the inventory skill the way she does. The young man's heart pounds as he realizes Patty has this rare and special talent too, and just as he starts to ask, she interrupts him. In an ethereal, slightly boastful voice, the fairy explains that unique talents are common among fairies, and many can store things in a private magical space as she keeps digging through her inventory. Flipping through hidden items and examining objects with a thoughtful look, she finds a small gleaming glass bottle of golden liquid that glows in the light. Then the fairy offers it to Shiro with a cheeky smile. He lifts the bottle to his lips and takes a sip. Warmth spreads through him and a burst of joy hits him instantly. He gasps in amazement and says the meat is incredibly tasty. Patty beams with pride and says it is great because she made it. Pointing out the meat is excellent since she cooked it herself, she tells Shiro he can take as much as he wants because she has plenty stored. There is no need to hold back. Stay up overnight to watch for anything that might catch them off guard while they rest. Speaking firmly but kindly, Patty tells Shiro to finish his drink and lie down to sleep for a while. Already feeling the drink's calming effect and a light drowsiness from the alcohol, Shiro smiles gratefully, follows without protest, closes his eyes, and lets himself rest. The next morning, Patty casually sits on the young man's head as he wakes, and she begins chatting with him. The forest is home to many races, some friendly and others not. She points out fierce orcs and huge, fearsome ogres, creatures who are not very smart but are full of brute force and hostility. And Patty, pointing eagerly, adds that if he looks over there he might spot elves, mysterious chanting beings who live in tune with nature. Once out of curiosity, she tried to get close to El's land, but to her surprise they put up a magical shield around their territory that stopped anyone from entering or even peeking inside, and she eventually gave up trying. Trying to cross the path, Shira listens as someone grumbles that the others seem distant and quiet, and eventually he leans his head back and sighs wearily. He asks for a short rest because his legs ache from walking so much. The fairy folds her arms and mutters, annoyed he's asking to pause again, but she agrees if it's only for a little while. Patty spots a strange flower while they sit and points it out, explaining in a knowledgeable tone that it's an unusual bit boon flower whose nectar tastes odd and awful. Shira arches his eyebrows, curious, as the fairy chatters happily about how she once tried the nectar by mistake and hated its lingering, awful taste. Shira thinks about Patty's habit of always talking about odd topics and filling his mind with interesting but mostly useless facts. They learn that long before Patty existed, the land belonged to an ancient nation called Jinni. The country later fell into ruins, and over time a dense wild forest grew over its former cities, now called the Forest of Jinna. Frowning, the young man asks if all this happened during the era of an ancient magical society. Patty snaps back, irritated, saying she couldn't possibly know that because it happened long before she was born. Shir shrugs and ends the debate, and Hade grows tense and watchful as her keen sense picks up something odd. Instincts kick in and Hade quickly tells Shiro to hide without hesitation or questions. Before they can move, faint shouts drift through the trees, calling Shiro's name. They are the AIA Flash adventurers searching for him and the forest. Ralph's loving voice asks whether Shiro can hear them. Lyra sounds frantic as she admits she would be devastated if he were gone. Nesca strikes Rolf with her staff and scolds him for his gloomy words as the warrior wipes away his tears. He insists Shiro is definitely still alive. Softening, Nesca pats his head to calm him and agrees she is okay. Darting between the trees, she looks for her friend. When Sherry finally hears familiar voices, he jumps up despite Patty's complaints. She calls him foolish for revealing himself so quickly. Shiro Kanjo explains these are his trusted friends and dear companions. Shouting that he's there, he makes them turn toward him. Then they notice Keela was gone. A bird had snatched the scout. Keela spots Shiro, hits the bird, gets away, and crashes down. She landed chest first on Shiro's face, leaving the group puzzled by the commotion. Tearfully, Keela hugs him tight, saying she thought he was dead, then hugs him again in relief and vows never to lose him again. Shiryu tells the group he's fine and asks them to stand as they bow. Lara, filled with regret, apologizes and reminds him she had vowed to protect him but failed. Nesca chimes in, saying this is the second time he has saved her life and promising to make it up to him. Shira says he's safe and back with his friends, and that's what matters. They begin to object. Interrupting, he stammers and asks if they are not his friends, and Lyra confirms they are. Keela says their friends stick with them even though their leader is a bit silly, and they tease Lyra and laugh together. While Roland admits he is a maze-sure who returned alone. Shearer says he wasn't completely alone and introduces Patty. They have been hiding behind a tree, and the adventurers are stunned. Shiro reveals she is a fairy and his guide, and that he owes her his life. Shocked, they press him for details because fairies are incredibly rare and legendary, and the ghost explains they rarely mingle with other races, so Shiro asks Patty if that is accurate. The fairy says slowly that they could not leave their area because it would break the rules. Sheer says he assumed fairies were common because the guild was called Blessing of the Fairies. Patty snaps back, annoyed, saying it makes no sense for them to share their blessings with humans, and suggesting again that perhaps a fairy wants to bless a human. Nesca asks if he didn't know, leaving the young man puzzled. Seeing Sherrer's confusion, the sorcerer steps in. It explains that the Blessing of the Fairies is the name of a special alcoholic drink made only by fairies, who are also called fairy maids. She goes back to Patty and asks if that is the drink she gave him. The fairy beams with pride and confirms it. Nesca sounds an alarm, asking if he really drank it. Shira isn't sure whether to stare at Lyre or Nesca, while the group peppers Shiro with questions about whether he really ate fairy maids. They doubt Shiru really drank something made by fairies, since one glass could buy a castle. Guild records show Ralph Chine's Inn was last sold 200 years ago. Stunned, Sheer learns how rare the drink is. Patty says she gave it to him because he reports to her. Stella shrugs it off while the warrior feels lost in the situation. Shira calls it a long tale. After he tells his friends what happened, their amazement is saved by a farer. Lyre steps forward to thank Patty for saving their friend. Lyre thanks Patty and offers to do anything to repay her for saving their companion. Shira then offers to help them find someone. The fairies' vague clues weren't much help, but they agreed to help with the search. With the adventurers reunited, they decide to return to Norik. Approaching the city, Patty's eyes light up and she points it out to Shiru, calling it the human's dwelling. The sorcerer's corrector clarifies that it's a city and a city. Nesco explains that settlements have different names depending on their size, and the fairy repeats the words to show she understands. Lyertel told Shiru that life as a subordinate is hard. Howdy spots someone in the distance and asks who it is as they approach the entrance where Anna waits for Shira. The little girl looks sad and a worried Shiro asks why she's there. Anna rushes to him crying and hugs him tightly, while Stella steps forward, relieved he's finally back. The Azure Flash group bids farewell, and Anna's mother notes the little girl had not slept, worrying about Shiru. He offers to carry Anna, but Stella says it's unnecessary because Anna will soon be too big to carry. She wants to hold her daughter while she still can. Shiro sees Stella is worn out and tells her to tell him if it gets too heavy. Stubbornly, Stella says she won't say a word and refuses his help. Stella refuses to hand Anna over because Anna is her daughter. Shrew walks them home, and when they arrive he says goodbye and wishes them a good rest. As he turns to leave, Stella stops him and says she forgot something. She invites him into her home. Return the heads to the shop and pat the marbles to that size. He asks what kind of homes fairies have, and she explains they built them high in the trees to keep monsters away. She changes the subject, and Patty asks Sheru whether he still remembers their deal. He confirms he will help her find her friend. Realizing it wouldn't take long in a small town, they agreed to start searching the next day and sealed the plan with a cheerful fist bump. Sheer asks the fairy if the delicious fairy-made drink she gave him is hard to make. Patty says having honey makes it easy, but getting it is hard. Last time she tried, she nearly died from BTEX. As Patty talks, the young man unzips his backpack, pulls out a jar of honey, and asks if it will do the job. Patty agrees and is amazed he found some. Looking closer, she is stunned and unsure whether it is real honey. Her shirt is sheer and pure, like it came straight from a beehive. Slipping her finger into the jar for a taste, the fairy delights in the flavor. Excited, she says this honey will make her meal even tastier, and Shiri wonders if that's true. Tired and stiff from sleeping on the forest ground, the young man decides to rest. Morning came and Shira was dozing on the couch with the fairy resting on his head when Anna suddenly appeared. A sudden movement wakes them. He asks why she is there and reminds her he told Stella the shop would stay closed today. The little girl says she brought some food in. Curiosity getting the better of him, Honest steps closer and asks about the girl on his head. Sheer introduces her as Patty, his new boss, and Patty the fairy fills Anna's eye with wonder as she asks whether Patty is like the fairies in storybooks. Petty asks who the child is, and the young man says Anna helps him at the shop. Changing the subject, the fairy asks Anna if she knows a man with blue eyes and blue hair, and Anna replies that she has never met anyone like that, which saddens Patty. Go ahead and come in, but remember he and Anana do not know everyone in town. The area is small, so they might find him. He suggests they start looking now and asks Patty if she wants that. Eager to help, Anna offers assistance. Exciting, Patty tests whether the girl truly wants to help. Hannah says yes, and the fairy squeals with joy. Shira says they should hide Patty first, and Anna offers her backpack. With the fairy tucked safely into the bag and everything ready, they head out to find Patty's friend. Shiru shows a photo on a necklace to several townspeople, but no one recognizes it. The elf at the town hall hesitates and asks for a name, while Gerald the merchant says he does not recognize it among his wares. Neither the dove nor the mercenary at the barnel, who owns it, does. He studied the picture, puzzled, because all 27 people he asked did not recall it. Begins to doubt that the fairy's friend is actually from this town. Patty suddenly remembers her friend, saying he lived in NK. All they had were their matching necklaces. I snapped a photo of Patty's pendant to show everyone. Sanka then arrives, searching for the young man. Someone mentions hearing he's off on another adventure with Liar's crew. Scolding him, she asks when he will stop making her worry. He apologizes, but St. Care brushes it off, saying she's just glad he's safe as she ruffles his hair. Anates says that his face is red, but Sharon sits, he's just warm and shifts focus by showing St. Cara a photo of the pendant. Studying it closely, Sanker feels it is familiar but cannot place it. She promises to come back if she remembers anything. He asks if she would really do that for him. Smiling, Sanka says yes, because she owes him for past help. She says goodbye and will stop by the guild. Sheer asks whether she will meet Emo, and Sankara corrects him. Confronting the Azure Flash group who endangered her friend, she gives off a menacing vibe. The young man quickly says he volunteered to go, but Sankara ignores him and walks off. Shaken, Shira hopes his friends Liar, Neska, Ralph, and Keela are safe. After she leaves, Anna asks if Patty can sleep in her bed, and she returns to the fairy for her thoughts. Patty cautiously agrees to stay with the little girl for only that night, while Shira nicknames her tiny sundry fairy. Anna arrives home carrying her backpack gently and tells her mother she has something to show her. It must stay a secret. Stella, at first puzzled, promises to keep it confidential and asks what it is. The little girl says it's in her bag. With those guesses of lizard or frog, she's about to be astonished. When the girl unzips her backpack, a small fairy named Patty appears and eagerly asks Stella if she is Anna's mother. Seeing how similar they looked, especially their eye color, Stella was stunned by the fairy and Anna froze with worry. Patty hops onto the bed Shara prepared for Stella and Anna, bouncing with glee and saying she's never rested on anything so comfy. Stella brings tea for everyone, then asks about the young man Patty mentioned. Anna chimes in that there's more to hear, and the fairy pauses briefly before Shiro encourages her to tell the whole story. The fairy says it began when she first ventured beyond fairylands and found a young man hunting a unicorn rabbit in the woods. Patty didn't know what tool he used, but it sent a tweet almost instantly. The young man was awful with the bow, and every miss left him on the verge of tears, reminding her of a child. That made Patty giggle, and she laughed until her side ached. Eventually, tired of his sulking, she stepped in and struck the unicorn rabbit perfectly. The young man stared at her in awe and asked about her being a fairy, marking their first encounter. After they met over the unicorn rabbit, he kept crying and praising how tasty it was, which confused the fairy because she found it awful. He then said he hadn't eaten properly in days. Grateful, the young man thanked her for saving his life and asked her name, but she hesitated. She recalled past cruelty from humans and said she would tell him once his hunting improved. Hunting together over time, they became skilled. He asked Patty if he'd pruned himself enough for her to share her name. Thrilled and ready to speak, she stopped at the memory of being labeled a cursed child. She couldn't say her name, so she promised to tell him later. Growing worried he didn't push her, that turned out to be their last meeting. Patty tells Anna that he was her friend, and though they seemed lonely together, they were not. Determined, the fairy says she must find him to tell him her name and learn his. Admitting she rambled, she feels water hit her and wonders if it's rain as Anna turns to her with tears in her eyes. Crying, Anna vows they will definitely find her friend, and the moved fairy agrees they will. 2 hours earlier, Sheer stepped out of a portal in casual home clothes with a towel wrapped around them, looking forward to a hot bath at home. Then goes to the shop's balcony to watch the sunset. El suddenly calls to him, and a young man asks him to wait, saying he will come down. Again this year, Shira notices something troubling. Concerned for the warrior whose face is swollen as if he'd been hit, Shira asks what happened. Lyre dismisses it, saying St. Kara stormed into the guild furious. Lyre asked if she'd come just to shout about them taking Shiru on a risky trip, and the mayor confirmed, saying she would spare no one. The warrior offered to let her slap or punch him because it had helped. Senka hit Lyre hard across the face with all her strength. Seeing the warrior's strength made him stumble, the leader of Azure Flash invites Shuru to drinks at the guild. They say Emo and the guild master will join them, and Sheer finds the idea enjoyable. The guild gathered at the bar and raised their glasses in a toast. Lyre counts down, and the group responds with a cheerful shout. Keela, Amal, and May Joinian raised their drinks. Shiru and Lyre gulped theirs down, and Ralph rose, watching them with a pensive expression. Prompt Lyre to ask if something is bothering him. Nate chimes in and asks if he dislikes the beer. Shiru, a little embarrassed, admits he doesn't like the beer and apologizes. Nate shrugs it off, saying she isn't a fan either. Surprised, Amy asks whether it's true, and the guild master confirms it, quietly noting that limited drink choices frustrated ventures. According to her, better choices might help, but the cost isn't justified. Keela says she prefers wine or cider this. Their sternness hides a pleasant aroma, and Neska cuts in, telling her not to expect too much. Shur asks whether the local wine is truly sour and Lyre, while he is slightly tipsy. Teases him about never trying wine or only sipping fancy wines as a grand merchant. Sheer says he hasn't, but back home good quality wines were affordable. He details 3 types, red, white, and rosa, leaving the adventurers in awe. But size is familiar with orange wine and says each variety has its own traits. Wines can be sweet or dry, light or robust, and their prices range from cheap to extravagant. He says wine experts match wines to meals, but he prefers sake. It, like wine, has varieties such as Jingo and Jume. Suddenly Shur realizes everyone at the bar is staring at him, and an older adventurer urges him to continue. He says trade between his homelands and other nations brought a variety of drinks. A crowd gathers around him in the street, and she sees a business opportunity. Speaking to the group, he asks them to come back in 3 days and promises to bring homeland drinks for everyone. 3 days later, Shiru transformed. Kong's hair was back and he wore a sharp bartender outfit. Anna compliments his stylish look and he returns the compliment. Stella admires his appearance, calling him professional, while Shira says she looks stunning. Lai arrives, notices how elegant everyone looks, and asks if Anna is helping out. Cher didn't want the young girl to work, but the girl insisted and even brought her mother. Nesko announces everything is ready after conjuring ice with magic. Keela serves drinks while Shiru offers everyone their favorite. Neska picks chocolate liquor. Keela chooses fruit wine. Anno is offered a drink and shyly asks for gin. She admits she wants ginger ale, and the crowd grows impatient, asking if they can drink yet. Shiro thanks them for waiting and starts the event, introducing himself as Shiro, the owner of Shiro's shop. He says he brought drinks from his store to liven things up after the forest missions, though some doubted how much he had. He also brought plenty of snacks to go with the drinks. Some adventurers quietly wonder if he's an alchemist, but no one gives it much thought. Everyone is eager for quality drinks, as the celebration she offered kicks off and sparks excitement among the guild members. Guests ready to enjoy the unique flavors he promised from his homeland cheer when Shira announces all drinks are on the house and invites everyone to have as much as they like, prompting excited applause from the crowd. Nervous, the young man worries about spending 3 million yen on goods, but still thinks it was a worthwhile investment. He reaches out to Guildmaster Ne Mirage to address the group. Ne gives everyone a warm welcome. Encourage them to have fun or remind them to be fit for work tomorrow. Drooling with excitement, the adventurers shout approval and rush forward to place their orders. The crowd swarmed Shuru and forced him into a corner, but Ne stepped in. Stomping her foot with authority, she warned she might end the event if they did not settle down. Shiro appreciates her help as the group lines up neatly. Lyre, first in line, asked Sherry what he wanted to drink and pointed to a bottle, curious about it. The young man identifies it as bottled beer, strongly suggesting that it is bottled beer. There are flavor options for it, and someone mentions that adding lemon juice could improve the taste. Azure Flash's leader follows Anna's advice, squeezes lemon into his beer, and is surprised at how much better it tastes. The beer is bubbly and refreshing, and the lemon adds a bright, tangy lift. He takes a hearty swig from his mug, Shir suggests a dash of salt to make it tastier, and soon everyone asks for the same drink. Patrons love it, so Shuru asks Stella for the bottle to his right. Anna, exhausted from keeping up with the demand, made a Mexican drink. The young man sees the night is a success, and everyone is enjoying themselves. Until a new customer steps forward, smirking and asking for the strongest drink available. Some adventurers know him as Alo, the indestructible one among the 16 heroes. Shir asks if he really wants the most potent option and offers Spirus, a drink so powerful it could ignite a flame. He pours it into a small glass as Alo grumbles about the tiny portion. He glares at Shuru, calls him a kid, brags that he's over 200 years old, and will protest a little about being treated like a child. She clarifies again that the drink's strength and 96% alcohol content mean a single sip could knock him out. Alo, offended, insists he has never been drunk and pushes back on the warning. The young man tells him to relax and warns that such a high dose could be fatal. The adventurer, eager to test his limits, removes his cloak and dares Daresharu to settle it with a fight outside. At that moment, humble cleric Ralph steps forward and introduces himself. Alo snaps and asks if the priest plans to preach. Accusing Shiro of insulting his dwarven pride, he says dwarves drink straight from barrels from birth and have alcohol in their blood. Ralph acknowledges Evo's feelings calmly and offers a solution after getting permission. Ralph says he can cast a healing spell, usually used for poison, to ease the effects of intoxication, after the dwarf demands to hear it. Turning to Shuru, Ralph says he can heal Elul if the drink makes him sick and asks if that works for everyone. All of them agreed and admitted they thought a drink would defeat him. Battling fearsome foes such as the Demon Lord and ancient dragons, he never knelt. Excitement ripples through the crowd at the mention of these legendary foes, and they roar their support for the dwarf. Shurur suddenly sees Elis appear much larger as the dwarf demands the drink. Make a wager. If he gets drunk, Shira can choose any reward. If he wins, he gets free drinks for life. Elo holds out his mug and orders it filled to the brim, and Shiro complies, accepting the bet. The dwarf sniffs the spirus and notes that its strong scent is unlike anything he's smelled before. He's already drunk before he tips the mother into the crowd's eager stares. He gulps down every last bit while Shrew watches in surprise and the dwarf sighs. He complains that his stomach feels like it is burning. He slams the mug onto the counter. He challenges the young man and asks if he looks tipsy. Shiro rubs his neck, admitting he misjudged him and lost their wager. Laughing, Elo declares the young man now owes him free drinks whenever Elo asks. Rocking so hard he falls backward onto the floor, completely wasted. The young man lectured Eldo, pointing out he had warned him against chugging so much at once. He noted that without his role there he might or might not have died a hero, and that his actions insulted the booze. The dwarf nods in agreement as nearby adventurers say they have never seen us so humiliated. Especially after countless fights, he was finally brought down by liquor. They ponder the drink's name, with one suggesting it sounds like something spiralated. They suggest calling it Toro Killer Little, and she did not realize the hero killer drink would sweep the continent like a storm. The guild hall is overflowing with adventurers sprawled out and passed out from drinking too much. Nesca, cheeks flushed, says she's never tasted anything so delicious, and Keela says she'd love to bring some home to her friends. Meanwhile, with Lyre present, Terry-eyed asks if they really drink all of Shearer's supply. Shearer admits it costs him a lot, but now every adventure produces his brew. The Lyre looks at him in awe and calls him the legendary merchant. The young man says he would be pleased if the night's chaos eased some tension. At that moment, two adventurers start brawling, but they're so sloshed they just collapse asleep in the keep, and he notes it's especially helpful since Anna handles lots of guild deliveries. Killa slaps Shrews on the back and calls him a solid guy. The young man grumbles that it's done, and the cat insists she barely tapped him. The Lyre questions the true purpose of the evening. Staring at the box, the warrior says he sees fairy wings poking out from it. She returns to her and asks if her friend has arrived. A gloomy Patty says no, he hasn't. The young man figures he's probably not an adventurer then. The fairy apologizes because Shuru went through all that for her. The young man and the warrior look at her with pity. Days have passed with no sign of Patty's friend. A young man went around town showing the pendant, but no one recognized it, and after he put up posters, nothing came of it. Shiru tells the fairy her friend may have left town, pointing out that many human cities lie beyond theirs. Petty guesses it's about 20, but Anna spreads her arms and says it's far more than that. Patty sags, overwhelmed by how many there are, and unsure how she will find her friend. Until Sankara pounds on the door, shouting for Shiru. Startled by the mayor and Sankara's stern faces, the young man announces she may have figured out who the man is. While searching, she says she is sure she has seen that pendant before, so she searched her house and found something. Sankara opens a small box and pulls out a necklace with attached matching patties, which Shiro recognizes right away. The mayor says it belonged to her great-great-grandfather, Monorak's first mayor. Someone asks what a great-great-grandfather is, and they are told it is your grandfather's grandfather. Sankar asks why they're hunting her great-great-grandfather, while the fairy cuts in and says it's because she asked. The mayor is stunned to see a fairy and demands to know what is happening. The young man tells the whole story. Sankara was stunned to learn her ancestor knew a fairy. Then Patty asks where he is, and the mayor looks confused. The fairy explains that Sankara is the daughter of her friend's son, so they are family. Sankar agrees, but Patty keeps pressing, insisting she must know where he is, and he grows even more puzzled. When Patty finally understands her situation, she asks how long fairies usually live. Patty says her clan dates it to about 3,000 years, though she is only 300. The mayor says people consider reaching 100 a blessing, mentioning that her great-great-grandfather died long ago. This surprises Patty, who remembers being shunned by everyone. Unloved even by her parents, she came to believe no one would miss her if she disappeared. On a full moon night, she broke the rules and flew out of her territory until she met her friend. The first person to look at her with warmth and kindness. He was the first to thank her, to smile at her, and to share moments of play in battle with her. He risked his life to protect her and gave her a pendant to show their bond, the first time anyone had given her such a treasure. A friendless girl treasured their time together when she suddenly found companionship. This friend became her closest companion and the first to bring her tears of joy. Hesitating to tell him her name when he asked, she feared it would ruin their connection. A quiet fear warned her that telling him could end their friendship, so she kept putting it off and promised to tell him later. He never pushed her, only saying he would wait for the right moment. Now that he's gone, Patty realizes his side was the only place she ever truly felt at home. Anna and Shiri watch her with pity and ask what she'll do next, or she'll return to the fairies. Sadly, she admits she has nowhere to go, confessing she kept a secret and was banished from her homeland. Lifting her hand, she exposes a mark on her side and reveals a brand on her stomach, which she requests. She says it symbolizes a walking disaster among fairies. She admitted she often wished she had never been born, especially since even her parents despised her. Life stayed fairly ordinary for her until rhinoceros beetles settled in nests near the fairy area. Hundreds began preying on the fairies for food and multiplied rapidly after settling in. The fairies were unable to escape until the food ran out. They soon blamed Patty She Grossangry. She insisted they had just made her a scapegoat and that she wasn't responsible for the beetles coming. Patty admits it was her fault after all. A curse led the clan leader to call her Patty Fulu. It means the one who severs destiny and their own tongue. She hoped to defy her fate, but he still cast her out, and Patty finds that strange. She admits it led her to rescue him, saying she thought saving that foolish human might help her find her friend. She then realized she'd been the real fool. Anna meets her gaze with compassion. Tears well up in Anna's eyes as Patty softly pats her head, asking her not to cry because it would make her cry too, and they hug, sobbing together. Sheer steps closer and asks whether he may ask a question. I'm wondering if Patty wants to save the fairies. She quickly agrees, and when he asks whether she still feels the same despite being exiled. Lowering her head, she says she owes the leader her name and that her parents, though they hated her, are still there. They are still her family, so she wants to help them. Shiro leans closer and suggests they go save them. Patty asks if he's serious, and he smiles as he assures her he is. She begs him to rescue the fairies, and Anna urges Shiro to help. He vows they'll succeed and says they'll start by heading to the Avengers Guild. When they arrive, adventurers murmur among themselves above Shiro. A young man asks the guildmaster to defeat a group of rhinoceros beetles, and she admits she understands his plea, but hesitates to take it on, convinced it is completely impossible. Shiro is taken captive as Anna and Patty stand behind him, visibly crushed. The guildmaster adds that wiping out a rhinoceros beetle nest is a major undertaking. It requires at least half of the guild's adventurers to join the effort. The young man becomes anxious about the cost of hiring so many people. She explains money is not the only problem, and that they also lack the influence needed, and the guild master admits they do not have enough sway to pull it off. Most adventurers are busy exploring ruins in the forest. If the nests were closer to the city, they might help, but the fairies' distant territory makes gathering them difficult. Offering an excuse for not being able to help, she turns to leave for other duties. Refusing to give up, Shiru calls out to stop her, and the young man offers a new idea. Advise them to treat it as a deal rather than a formal job. Seeing Nei's confusion, he asks her to hear him out. Grabbing her focus, he uses his inventory ability to open a portal right before her eyes, leaving Nei stunned as Shir explains this is his special skill. He explains his plan that, when the adventurers reach the ruins, he will use his ability to move armor and other items to speed their work. Even if his beetle problem takes days, they won't spend time exploring. Then he asks the guild master for her opinion. Mei admits the suggestion is appealing, giving the young man a spark of hope. His optimism fades when she reveals she has her own enchanted item with the same inventory ability and can open one too, leaving Shearer floored while Nei says hers can hold as much as 3 wagons. That makes him feel bad. Nei apologizes again for refusing his request. At that moment, Ayla steps in and asks what's happening. Elo wonders whether the young man is in trouble. She checks whether he is being too noisy and apologizes afterward. He stresses how badly he needs to get rid of the forest rhinoceros beetles. Ilo, a dwarf, pauses to think, then says he didn't mean to add anything else. Confused, Shiru asks whether he's serious about helping and why he would offer. The dwarf reminds him about the bet they made. The young man remembers it, but the eldest grumbles that he has truly forgotten. Share any questions about whether he is genuine, since Nate just called it a massive job. The dwarf sharpens his axe, muttering that he should not be lumped with weaklings and claiming he can handle the beals alone without effort. Suddenly the liar appears and says he overheard everything. The Azure Flash group also volunteers to join. Nate cuts in, waving her sword in frustration, and says that guild rules forbid taking unapproved requests and that anyone doing off-the-books work will face consequences. O interrupts, saying she was wrong. Liar agrees with the dwarf. Elo lost a bet, so helping Shiro is how he settles it. Keela teases that the dwarf fell flat during that big scene over the bet. Oos tells her to be quiet while Liar says his group are Shear's pals and will help for free. Neska from Sarshur steps forward and points out that since they aren't seeking pay, it's not an official job. Keela hugged Shiro and said they would step up for their friends in need. Moved by their support, the young man thanks them and promises they will celebrate together once the beetles are gone. Some passing adventurers here ask if helping means more shared drinks. It depends, the young man says, adding that he found the bottle of rare fairy meat while sorting his stock. The adventurer is amazed to own such a legendary drink and eagerly signs up as others join in. Nay glances around nervously, insists she cannot allow it, and points at the young man while telling everyone to focus on the ruins. She asks what proof he had that he owned the item, but Patty interrupts from inside Anna's backpack. By showing it in person, she confirmed he had it because she had made it. Sheer asks why the chief left her hiding place. Surprised to see the fairy, they ask the young man what is going on. The young man sighs and says Patty is his boss, and that she was the one who wanted to eliminate the Run-No-Sour-Rose beetles. The fairy wanted only one thing that could save the rest of her kind, but he could not do it alone. A mere traitor, he could not face dangerous creatures by himself. Determined, he kneels before the guild master and begs Nay to save the fairies. Tears well up in his eyes. She kneels beside him, begging for help to save Patty's family. The fairy promises that if they defeat the beetles, she'll make something special for everyone and urges Nay to assist the fairies. Nathan is stuck in a tough spot, complaining that Shira was harsh. It makes her look like the villain. The guild master then orders all bronze-level adventurers to gear up for combat. About to wipe out the rhinoceros beetle nest, she instructs everyone to follow her to the G-Forest, and the adventurers set off with purpose. They travel for a while until Patty announces they've reached the spot, and Sheer is stunned when the fairy points to a dungeon entrance and says the nest is inside. Patty says the monsters there trap the fairies and keep them from escaping. A few fairies appear at the cave entrance, hungry but too afraid to come out. She turns to Nay and asks if he was sure these were the ruins of the ancient magical civilization the guild had been seeking. The fairy says the odd cave has always been there, and her clan's leader says a civilization built it long ago. Hardly believing what she sees, Nate feels her dreams could really come true. Pulling out a map, she lays out her plan and tells them to split into 3 groups by rank. To keep everyone safe, the 6 Michael-ranked adventurers would start with a sudden strike into the ruins. 17 gold-level adventurers would take out any monsters emerging from the entrance. 15 silver-level adventurers would take care of any that slipped past. She keeps receiving orders to Oz saying that, as a platinum-ranked adventurer, he should stay back for emergencies. Shiru warns that he will enter the nest alone, as the dwarf abruptly dashes off shouting. Neza's disbelief grows, and the other adventurers soon follow his lead and leave angry. Cursing those reckless adventurers, she tells the Ad. Flash will stay on guard with Shiro and Patty, and the group promises they will manage it. Nay shifts the plan, excitedly telling everyone to follow Alo into the nest to lure the monsters out of the ruins. The adventurers fight a fierce battle against the creatures. Meanwhile, she checks his watch, sees 2 hours have passed since they went in, and hopes all are okay. Suddenly, Nay shows up in the young. A man rushes up to her and asks how the mission is going. But he always finishes last, loudly asking what Shira thinks of him. He had his trusted axe slung across his back. The dwarf brags he did not even get tired. Nay supports him, saying he single-handedly took down nearly all the beals. The guildmaster says she saw it herself and guarantees no monsters are left alive. Shira stands speechless, unable to believe that O has defeated hundreds of monsters alone. Ni agrees that it's unbelievable. The young man wonders whether the monster has had a queen bee as a final challenge. The dwarf says he doesn't know, and that if one existed, he probably smashed it with the rest. He looks at Nay and says he's hungry, asking whether they brought meat and drinks. Shiro returns to Patty and says this is great news. The fairy hesitates but agrees. The young man asks if she wants to tell the other fairies. As she begins to answer, Howdy hears a cry for help. She asks whether Shira heard it too, but he does not know what she means. In an instant, she understands and takes off. An alarm sounds as she explains she must leave. Shiru grows anxious and chases after her. Lyre questions where he's headed. Strange sounds appear as a tiny fairy zooms in, pleading for help and clearly in distress. A monster's talons snatch the little fairy just as Patty arrives, ready to fight the beast. She hesitates, afraid her magic might hurt the captured fairy. Patty strikes the monster and demands it release the small fairy, but the beetle knocks her back hard. Shira rushes over, worried, while Keela jumps onto the monster and insists she knows its weak spot. Using her blade, she stabs the insect and frees the little fairy, who tumbles down. Nesca quickly casts a well-aimed spear spell at the monster. Patty swoops in and catches the falling fairy. Confirming she's not hurt, Jor Express is grateful to the sorceress and the scout for their help. Lyre scans the area and asks if they're okay while he and Ralph are under attack by more monsters. The warrior warns the situation is dire. The place is overrun with insects pouring endlessly from the nest and trapping the group. Stunned, Nay watched the dwarf defeat them all moments ago. An adventurer steps forward and says he has found a hidden exit at the rear of the nest. Hidden under the monster's remains. Ninsis holds herself responsible for Kidding and Blaine's oversight as guild master. Petty warns the fairy will be unsafe if they don't act. Sherry asks her about using the magic she used earlier. Lyre grumbles that enemies never stop coming, and spotting the young man holding a patty, asks what he's up to. Sheer asks the fairy if she's ready since they must strike together, and the fairy says she is. The young man holds his makeshift flamethrower beside Patty. They unleash a huge fiery burst, and the monster collapses into burning ashes. They marvel at how well their plan worked, maybe too well, though they are not heading skyward. Lyre wonders aloud whether the young man could secretly be a skilled mage. Nesca interrupts to point at a map. A massive monster looms in the sky with jagged, fearsome teeth. Stunned, Lara watches as Nesca says it must be the queen. Alarmed, Keela notices how enormous it is. Shure asks Patty whether she can use that spell again, and the fairy assures him she can and will take down this pest with ease. Ralph yells a warning as the queen beetle lunges with massive jaws. Cher and Patty waver, then O steps up. He unleashed his thunder of justice attack and hit the beast with electric jolts. Wounded, the queen begins to fall, and the dwarf apologizes for the delay. Eldos shrugs off Shira's thanks, saying he was only settling a score. Years had passed since the dwarf last used his full strength with his reliable axe, a sealed gift from the immortal witch. Here is what you should know about Eldo's tale. Shrew asks whether justice is carved into the axe. That confirms it, and adding that seal lets in wheel justice magic twice daily. The young man remembers his past, especially that his grandmother loved the action show Real Justice, starring Steven Seagal. Surprised, Eldos asks how the young man knows this, and she tells the whole story. The dwarf suspects he is Alice Goose Grandson, noticing a slight resemblance. A voice calls out to Patty. She turns to the clan leader and asks what's happening. As the circle fairy steps out from the trees, Lair marvels at how many there are, and Nesca finds them charming. In a deep tone, the clan leader asks why Patty is here despite her exile, and why humans are fighting the beetles. Angry, Patty retorts that he has no right to care because he banished her, so she owes him no explanation. Sheeran steps forward, introduces himself to the leader, and says that Patty saved his life, and tasked him with defeating the monsters and protecting the fairies. The elder asks whether Patty returned to rescue them, noting the irony that the Cursed One is their savior. Nesca speaks up with a question, and Patty shows the sorceress a birthmark on her belly, explaining that a fairy born with it brings disaster to their people. Amazed, the sorceress recognizes it as a seal. Nesca explains to the guild sorceress that the symbol marked those with powerful magic. Patty says that long ago many with the seal suffered because their powers went wild and consumed them. That was long ago. They discovered anyone could learn magic with basic skills. Now most who have that power become top sorceresses. Some tribes and races still fear and misunderstand the seal, yet it is a blessing from the gods. Stunned, the tribe's elder sees that their legend was false. Nesca offers to teach Patty the magic she learned at the academy, and Patty is moved. The sorcerer says that if she masters her powers, she could help the fairies on her own next time. Her grandfather, the clan leader, apologizes for the pain she endured and is ashamed as both leader and family. The elder kneels in regret. Patty stops him and says his exile led her to meet Shuru and allowed her to save everyone, surprising the fairy. She tells the ashamed fairies that they did not know Ron. Later at Shuru's shop, he asks whether Patty will return to the fairy kingdom as her grandfather wants. Patty agrees and Anna cries, not wanting to be separated from her. Patty notes that humans live short lives, so staying with them will leave her alone again someday. She came just to find Shuru, who understands. She thanks everyone for their help. Sankara rushes in with a letter found among her great-great-grandfather's things, addressed to Patty's friends. Patty asked her to read it. The woman's friend calls her his best pal. Years had passed since they promised to meet again, as seasons changed and time flew. He says she teases his now thinner arms. He can barely walk and cannot run, but he still dreams of their forest runs, passing her as she reads on. Meeting an elf, he heard that fairies live longer than humans, and he translated her name, which she learns means the one who cuts through fate. Her name, Fulu, sounded lovely as he said it while writing. He says his name, Sankara, and thanks Patty for being his life. Anna holds her ancestor's letter saying Patty meant a great deal to her great-great-grandfather. Patty recalls he was Sankara, her only friend who learned her name, loved someone, and had children and great-grandchildren, she says. Tearful, Patty says she is glad Sankara had a happy life. Sheer tells her that human lives can be short, but friendship outlasts time. He assures Patty that Sankara will always be her friend in her heart, no matter what, and wipes away her tears. The fairy agrees with him, and even Sankara is touched by the moment. The young man then asks the fairy to keep both him and Anna in her heart, even if it's only in a small part of it. The young man pulls a photo from his pocket showing him, Anna and Patty smiling and making peace signs while naked. He says everyone in the picture is his friend, and they are his very best friends. Patty grows emotional, and Anna, crying, agrees, saying she and the fairy are partners. Azure Flash's adventures appear, and Lyre's Smiles arrives too, noting they are all friends. The croceful meows point out how lucky they are to befriend the fairy. Nesca steps forward with a serious expression, and tells Patty she fully understands her. Nesca says that as a half-elf she will outlive humans by a long time, but she still loves a Lyre without fear. Lyre watches her as the sorceress adds that every moment with him will remain in her heart forever. Nesca asks the fairy about her plans. Patty says firmly she fears nothing and will stay with them. After all, the clan leader never set a return date. Also, Nesca offered to teach her magic, and Patty couldn't leave anyway. Patty calls Anna a crybaby and says she won't abandon her. Time moves differently for them, and she will return to her kingdom only when she dies of old age. The young man gives a nervous chuckle and says he's not that old yet. Anna and Terry-Eye hug Patty, who jumps and grumbles at the sudden embrace. 2 months fly by and the toughest festival arrives. The city hums with decorations and excitement. Shuru had promised the mayor he would help out. Shura hires Anna to take pictures of the townsfolk. Meanwhile, he and Sankara will handle Nakshan. Eagerly holding up a bottle of spirits, the young man calls for bids on the hero-killing drink as the crowd scrambles for each item. Sheer reveals the last item, a drink so delicious only those blessed by a fairy can taste it. He holds up a bottle of meat. A sign proclaims that Patty, now the city's tourism star, made it herself. The fairy looks shy as Chiru calls for a loud cheer for her. Bidding begins at 1 gold coin. The young man drives the bids higher. Once it's over, Sankara and Shiro sit on a plaza bench as the young man brags about the auction's success and laughs at the mayor's goofy face on the meat they sold. Sankara says anyone would react that way to such a haul. He received 50 gold coins for the drink. Shiro grins and says he will boost the city's funds. The mayor thanked Shur, crediting him with making it all happen. Embarrassed, the young man says he only came up with the idea and Patty did the real work, so Sankar should thank her. The mayor nods as Patty walks up and they exchange a brief chat, and the fairy says she just thought of something and asks a casual question. She is wondering if Shuru and Sankara could have a baby. Shir stammers, visibly flustered. Sankara's face turns bright red as he blurts out that they're not even together. The fairy says Stella told her about reincarnation and suggested a baby could bring your friend back, which makes things even more awkward. Notes that people hold ceremonies before having children. Sankara, flustered, steps back and says there are steps and challenges to handle first. Patty cuts them off, shouts for silence and snaps at Shur, pressing him to say if he means no, her tone sharp and demanding. A young man jokes about making a baby on the spot, then says that would be an abuse of power. At that moment, Stella and Anna arrive, and the little girl asks whether the auction is over. Shir confirms it and asks about the photo she took. Excited, she said she loved a group photo of everyone, and he agrees it is a great idea. No street lights lit the city, but lanterns that night bathed everything in a soft glow. Norwich was the city Sankara had built from nothing, and Shuryu was part of it. While Shira gets everyone ready for the photo, a woman calls his name. He turns and asks who she is, and she asks whether he doesn't know her. In the dim light, her face is hard to make out, and the young man admits he can't place her and asks where they might have met. Stepping into the light, she calls Shuru a fool and reveals she is his grandmother. Suddenly, Shir remembers her and how he'd been so sure she was still alive and would come to the festival. Even after becoming a merchant, Shira still hoped to find his grandmother. Only 2 months ago, Sankara told him the witch had been at last year's harvest festival. During that mission, he was fighting insect monsters with Azure Flash. And he had met Patty Fulu, a moment that meant a great deal to him. A lot had happened since then, and before he knew it, the harvest festival was here again and he was enjoying it with his friends. At that moment she appeared and surprised Shuru. He asked what she had just said, and she insists on cheese for his grandmother. Anna asked who this woman was. She insists she is his grandmother, but the little girl says she looks too young for that role. The woman agrees with a smile, steps closer to Shuru, and flashes a peace sign. Hannah is asked if she sees the family likeness. Stunned by the peace sign, Shuru steps back and says she cannot be his grandmother. Put off by the idea, Shuru explains that his real grandmother was over 80 and very frail. This wasn't a young, fashionable girl. It couldn't possibly be her. Sankara shyly approaches, calls to her Risu, and the witch greets her, asking how she has been. Amazed, the young man hears the mayor praise the witch and credit Shira for the festival's success. Aresu watches quietly, noting that her share had helped the witch. He said he'd turned out to be a fine man and that taking him to festivals when he was a kid had paid off. She asks whether she is really his grandmother and keeps insisting she is. To test her, he asks for her favorite movie, and a Risu replies, Lethal Weapon. Pressing further, he asks for her second favorite, and Yura says it might be Braveheart but picks Mad Max. When Sheer asks about her favorite actor, she confidently replies that it is Nell Gibson. A Risu sighs, she called him overly careful and said it hurts her feelings. She asks if he remembers being 7 and reminds him he wet his pants on the way home and she had to change him. Shearer says it didn't need to be mentioned and asks where she'd been all this time and why she left without a word. Aruzu looks at him gently, apologizes, and asks him not to be upset. Patty steps forward worried, asks who that person is, and senses a strong mana coming from her. Sankara beams, says she will introduce the living legend. Immortal witch Arisu draws nearby people together. Everyone wants to speak to the witch. Arizato teases the mayor for being too loud. Sankara apologizes, and the witch comforts her, saying she's used to it now. However, she can no longer enjoy the festival, as something suddenly occurs. A magic circle forms and a sword lifts out of it. A voice shouts that it's the legendary sword Mel Gibson. Harusu apologizes and explains that this was her reunion with her grandson. Swinging his sword, he wishes everyone sweet dreams as they drift off. Shiro asks what she is doing, and the witch reassures the young man that what he saw was only a trick of the mind. Stepping closer, she wraps her arms around him. Resisting, he pulls back and questions her actions. Risu insists they must hurry and leave, and when a confused Shira asks for an explanation, the witch says it's obvious and opens a glowing portal. Arisu pulls him toward it, promising they're going back to his home. A portal opens into Shur's world. As they tumble through the sky, he cries out in anguish, and just before they smash into the roof of the house, Arisu intervenes. Waving her magic, a Risu guides them safely through the building and lands on the ground floor while Shir reels from the drop, overwhelmed. Arisu stretches her arms, happy to be home, while the young man pours a cup of tea. Erosu sips as she remembers how playful he was as a child. Now he serves her with a grumpy look. He snaps that he's 25 now, not a kid anymore. The witch notes he seems eager to speak his mind. She agrees, saying he has a lot of questions, starting with the most pressing, and he demands to know who she really is. Risu pouts and reminds him she already said she's a witch, and that should be enough. The young man insists it doesn't clarify anything and urges her to act her age. Shira brings up the chaos her absence caused in the family and asks why she disappeared without a word. Arusu dismisses it, saying witches have reasons she cannot share. Grumbling, he says dodging the question like that is wrong, then asks whether she uses magic to look younger. Denying the claim, she says her youthful appearance is genuine, leaving others stunned. Arisu explains her older appearance was a magical disguise made because people in that world would question why she did not age. She asks Shuru to watch closely. It then shifts into an elderly form before his eyes. A young man stares in disbelief as the girl turns into a wrinkled old woman. The witch teases him, asking if he is glad to see the grandmother he remembers. Shirin says he's not, he's just shaken and admits it's almost too much to process. Arisu says Shur's grandfather once asked her to stay young forever for him, praising her as cute and beautiful. She adds that they would spend passionate nights, their faces flushed and close together. Shiro cuts her off and pleads with her not to tell him any details about his grandparents. Chuckling, Harisu asks if he has any other questions. The young man shows her the portal hidden in the closet, and Harsur recounts how long ago it happened. After putting all their savings into building the house, she and her husband struggled financially and had no money for travel or getaways. Her idea was to turn an unused room into a portal, connecting their world to Rufaro. Together, they share endless adventures and make the most of their magical escape.